All right, welcome to another week of All Politics So Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. We are here with co-host Zaid Mohammed. We have Michael in the background doing all the things that he does best, and we are here with another week. Our first guest tonight is going to be Marcia Brown, the Vice Chancellor of Rutgers University. She will be on in a few minutes at 7 o'clock. Of course, we have the vote where we have activists from around the country who are going to be talking about the latest things that are going on. And at 8 o'clock, we are going to have a really good project that talks about the Black Power in the 19th century. And that is by an artist and Noelle Lorraine Williams, who will be talking about that. And that's actually pretty. I'm looking forward to that as well. So we're gonna have a good night. We're gonna have an exciting night of really good conversation with a bunch of really knowledgeable people. It's going to be a nice learning night. We have Donna coming in right now. Hey, Donna, how are you?
She's
well, she'll be coming in soon.
Quite in yet.
All right. And hey, Donna, how are you?
There you go. We beamed her up.
Welcome. We're going to start off. We're waiting for Marcia Brown to come on, but we're going to start off talking about a news story that is near and dear to Baba Zaid. Like, one of the things that we don't talk about enough are political prisoners in the United States. We don't talk about their even existence. We don't acknowledge that they exist, but they do. It's not a conspiracy theory. These are things that are real. And in Philadelphia, you have a prosecutor that is known for being a progressive prosecutor. Right now, he is, the news today is 3 ex-Philly homicide detectives to be charged with perjury for their testimony during the retrial of an innocent man. And, this same person is not talking about Mumia at all. While we're waiting for Marcia Brown to come on, maybe you could start talking about that, Zaid.
And let's be brief because Dr. Brown, right? Am I correct? Is it Dr. Brown?
She's a lawyer. So yes, she is on. Actually,
she's here. Yeah, but and as she just comes in, I just want to pause and just have a moment of silence for Pop's own member Amanifu, who passed on today, and he's a great. Say that again. I'm sorry.
Amanifu Williams.
Amanifu Williams, who passed on today. And one of the things that many that Amanifu's done, I know somebody put in his brief history, but as we get that together, but one of the things that I'm sure that he's done, he was one of the founders of the holiday that we celebrate, Kwanzaa, and he was at the table when those plans were being made and how the celebratory was going to come about. So I just want to say his name, Amanifu, and then we'll talk more about him and maybe have Chairman Ham come on and talk about his long body of work.
All right. So yes. So welcome, Vice Chancellor Brown. It's an honor to have you back again. We don't often do part twos so quickly, but the interview that we did with you before, we learned so much unexpectedly about your time in activism in Newark and all of the different organizations and the things that you were a part of. We really think that you gave so much information that it is good to go back over that and learn from it. But we didn't get most of the story, right? We didn't, like, you are Vice Chancellor Brown. You were part of the institution of Rutgers-Newark and an institution in yourself. You have touched the lives of many as an educator, and that includes myself. So first, a big thank you again, because a lot of the things that, like, there are so many different areas that you contributed to as your time as Vice Chancellor. You were instrumental in getting debate at Rutgers-Newark, and we're always a supporter of debate teams in Newark. You are an activist yourself on campus, helping Black students, helping bring a more diverse community, getting more people, faculty of color hired. you did so much and touched so many people's lives in ways that most people will never realize all of the good things that you've done. So I just want to thank you again for all of the wonderful things that you've done and all of the people that you've helped as your time as Vice Chancellor at Rutgers. So welcome and thank you.
Well, first of all, it's very hard for me to say no to you and Zaid. So, but this is the last time I'm gonna say yes.
Well, hopefully that means that we can do it every moment.
Yeah, this is the last time I'm gonna say yes because I'm no longer Vice Chancellor Brown. I mean, I am retiring, and my successor is there. She's an amazing woman. Oh my God, she is just going to be doing some great, great things, bringing her own footprints there, and so I'm very happy about that. And then hopefully I can, go on the next journey. But let me just start off by saying, listen, it's so hot. If we could generate this kind of heat in the struggle, we'd be much farther along.
Fair enough.
I don't see y'all have no bottles. Where's your water? Where's your water here?
I just did my refill.
Okay.
My pre-air refill.
Hydrate.
Okay, all right now. That's right, because we got to keep that water going,
Lots of water, just off camera.
Oh, okay. Well, usually mine is scotch, but today it's so hot. I can't have that.
And you're like, now that you're about to retire, it could be scotch a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
So, Vice Chancellor, could you say one? Right? Mm-hmm. No. Could you say yes one more time when you bring in the person who's succeeding you in, so you can introduce her? Could that be your last yes?
I would love to do that. That's a yes.
Okay.
That's a yes because
nobody accepted that last yes mess.
in her current role, I should say.
In the current role, right? As she's gonna, and that's the way it should be. Like sometimes we don't like to give up these spots, right? We were like, I ain't going nowhere. I'm gonna die in this job. But no, you can't do that.
That's a big problem among some of our folks.
It's a big problem. They don't want to give up, and not only don't they want to give up, they're not teaching anybody anything. They're not teaching them how to walk into that space, in that position, because truth be told, we're all underground. I don't care what your title is. So,
and when you said we're all underground, and I think this is a good way to get into your career at Rutgers. Last time we did the interview, we talked a lot about your political activism in Newark, and we ended the interview when you started at Rutgers. So that was actually, we talked for an hour, but what I thought was going to be the whole interview, we only started right at the very end, which is why we wanted to come back.
Yeah, we were all over the map with
as an administrator.
But that's what happened when you get old. I'm all over the map. I can't stay focused.
No, it was a great interview because you told us about so much that we had no clue about. So it wasn't your lack of focus at all. It was we were so impressed by what was going on. We just had to ask you more questions. But
that's why my quote unquote friends aren't answering my calls anymore right now since that last interview.
But listen, hey, nobody wants to talk about pubs.
I know. But Zaid, I do not care. Right. I mean,
so they don't call you, you call me. It's all right. I got your back.
It's all right. I'm okay. I just find it interesting that that's the case, because you can't be like that. People call themselves leaders. That's why I don't call myself a leader. I call myself a servant. And I'm trying to be a servant of the people. And that's always an uphill climb on the rough side of the mountain. So, I'm not trying to hide anything. And we just got to speak truth to power, as you always write about.
And when you first got to Rutgers, and can you tell us that story again? And what grounded the way in which you moved through the university? How did you get there? And what was your thinking when you first got there about some of the things that you would do?
Well, here's the interesting thing, and I think it's really good for our listeners and for our people in our community to understand how what we call careers, or the positions that we occupy, are in many ways driven by what people have done before and what people are doing while you're there and then afterwards. Because at the time that I became a member of the Rutgers community, Black and brown students had already taken over Conklin Hall, and they had demanded that this university, this particular one here in Newark, which was predominantly white and had been predominantly white for the last 75 years, bring in Black and brown people. So it had created a lot of intensity, a lot of activity on the part of the leaders at that time, the main one being Norman Samuels, who just happened to be, a white liberal. And when Chin, I don't know if you remember Chin, the Council on Higher Education in Newark, and these were the 4 presidents, people should know about them anyway, the 4 presidents of the public schools that are in Newark: Essex County College, NJIT, Rutgers-Newark, and at that time it was called UMD&J. That was the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. Those 4 presidents met every month. They called themselves the Council on Higher Education in Newark, and the residual efforts from the medical school fight had really led to them coming together and trying to figure out how they could do restoration, and work with some of the leaders who were rising leaders at that time. It wasn't just the juniors, but there were other people, other community people who were at that time, and they had made demands on those presidents about land, had made demands on those presidents about housing. And so and
when you're talking about the fallout from the medical school, you're talking about the building of the medical school and the displacement of really thousands of people.
Absolutely. The building of the medical school, the displacing of whole neighborhoods. And, that had gone on in the 60s, not just with the medical school, but with Rutgers-Newark itself. So Rutgers-Newark itself displaced several neighborhoods in order to be there. So a lot of people don't realize that.
Wow. So, and I don't mean to cut you off, Vice Chancellor. Yeah. So that means and just putting this all in perspective, you have 280, then you have the colleges, and then you have the medical school. So you moving people, how far can you push them until you push them out of New Jersey, perhaps? Okay.
Right. Gotcha. Like they're chess pieces. And the thing was, no one in those communities were involved in the planning efforts. They never are. That's why we always have to come after the fact and try to beat on somebody's door and say, hey, stop what you're doing, but they had thought that they could just do all that and people would take it. But Rutgers-Newark, displaced about 5 different neighborhoods that had housing, schools, cleaners, everything that makes up the platform of a neighborhood. And the medical school had done it. And like you say, it just had been a whole, era of displacement. So I was one of the ones who was coming to those meetings. They were being held at Essex County College, related both to the medical school and to building affordable housing somewhere in the University Heights area. And the Norman Samuels, who was the president of Rutgers-Newark at that time, said to me that they were looking for somebody to work in the law school to work with a program that was bringing in Black and brown students. And that program, by the way, which is called the Minority Student Program, which is the program that I went to law school on, was only there because of what happened with those students who took over the Conklin Hall, those Black and brown students. They were the gateway to all of that happening, to the EOF program, which although Governor Kane is giving credit for that, but that was actually one of the demands, not in that language, but that was one of the demands that those students made. Vicki Donaldson was one of those students. There were 20 of them. I can't name them all, but they were the ones who made it possible for these developments to take place, in which we now began to see a more diverse, more inclusive, let me put it that way, university. And so when Norman Samuels asked me if I would be willing to do that, I said yes. I had a law practice at the time with 4 other women. We called ourselves FBW, 5 Black women. So, and we were doing work in the community. And I said that I would do that, for a couple of years. I wanted to see how the program was operating. I wanted to make sure that we weren't just bringing in Black and brown people, but what Black and brown people were you bringing in? Because the question was, how many of those students were coming from Newark? And then let's keep in mind that, both the gatekeeping test, both on the undergraduate level and at the law school level, was about GPAs and these tests, these gatekeeping tests. And the reason why we had to have these programs anyways, because those tests became gatekeeping weapons, if you will, to keep Black and brown people out of these institutions and out of these arenas. So I thought that maybe I could be helpful if I took on the role at that time, which was associate dean in the law school, where we will bring in Black and brown people and also from Newark. So that sort of began my 22-year career at Rutgers-Newark, because while there, I got asked to work on the EOF program, and I became the EOF director for several years. In between being the EOF director, which was, a similar program to MSP in that it brought undergraduate students into the school, gave them money for tuition, for books. It really leveled the playing field in many ways. And then once those young people got into the university, they were also given counseling. So because one of the things that we knew that had to happen when you haven't been, I remember when I went to college, my parents put me on a bus with a handkerchief and a dime, because then, you could go into those telephone, what do you call them? The ones where you open up the door.
The telephone booths. The booths.
Telephone booths, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, most of our young people probably don't know what we're talking about.
Don't know what it is, right?
But then you could go into those booths and, calling was a dime. But I had to take a bus 90 miles away. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what, to expect. I didn't know anybody who had went to college. So the thing that the EOF program did and does was to help level the playing field. That first of all, Black and brown people are running the program, so they see people who look like them. And then they have the resources, both in terms of financial and in terms of academic support, to help them to become rooted into the culture of higher education. And that is what, EOF has been doing for, I think, the last 25 years that they've been around. So, but in between, and the thing you spoke about in terms of the debate program and funding some projects in Newark, I had a chance to work at Lucent Technology in between being at the law school and being at the at EOF, because in that time period, I think opportunities were coming up, just like now certain opportunities are coming up because of the death of George Floyd and others. And
now,
so,
are you talking about when you're talking about when you started at Rutgers, are you talking about the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s?
We're talking about the mid 90s. Yeah, the mid 90s. Because up to that point, I have been working for HUD. I worked for HUD, the U.S. Department of HUD, for 17 years.
Okay.
And unfortunately, Newark was not my community. My community was Long Branch and all the southern communities, Camden. So I didn't have a chance to really use the resources of HUD to make an impact in Newark. But after those 17 years, I went to clerk for the Chief Justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court. And after I left that, I then came back to Newark and opened up a law practice with these other women. So that takes me into the mid 90s. And so in between.
Yeah, I know you paused because you just thought about, you naming 22 years at Rutgers, 17 years at HUD. You was like, oh, I've been working a lot, because I know I'm sitting here like, and she's 50 years old, and how's she been doing this since she's 10? Like,
yeah, right. I wish.
And
I
law
wish
firm.
I want to know. No, this is my 71st year, and I am proud of it. So
that's a blessing.
Don't even try to take it away from me. I got those lumps. They real.
Part of what I'm thinking is that there's so much more history in terms of just like the law firm and all of the things that we could learn from that as well. So there's so much that's there.
Vice Chancellor, were you there when Chief Justice Ruth was at RBG? Were you at Rutgers the same time?
No, she actually was there in the mid 70s.
Okay.
In 71 through 74, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so she preceded you. Okay,
she was there,
all
but
right.
she preceded me. Right.
Okay, all right.
RBG used to be Red Black
now you
White too, by the way.
She was a beast too. That woman was a
Yeah,
beast.
that's what all of that go because I hear the 5 black women. I'm sorry, and law is like 5 black women, and then the law firm, and then you had Chief Justice who changed some
he
some
did.
Ruth Bader, who she did some great law around attacks around women, and then I always and also thinking about the different Barbara Kukla and all the women that did things in the different colleges. So you're just touching the surface, like ooh.
That's just the surface. And actually, Barbara put out a book.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to check that out on New Jersey women, women who had made change happen. That book, I forget what the name of it is, but it is on women in New Jersey.
Right.
So there's a lot of history in there. You might want to look at that. I mean, I think for the sake of our young people, so that they know, sometimes they don't have an inkling about who's been doing what behind the scenes because, we have the celebrities. But in terms of people who've been, trying to be movers and shakers, it'd be great if they could know them and want to emulate them.
Right.
Right. And so the law firm, and these women, all of us were doing things. We created a clinic a law clinic at Essex County College. Dr. Yamba, we went to him and said, hey, this is free. We just want to provide some legal information for our people, especially on contracts and wills and basic everyday stuff that they didn't know about. And so there were 4 of us who ran that clinic, me, Dwayne Warren, who's now the mayor of Orange, and 2 other brothers. I think Eric Pennington was part of that as well. But we ran that clinic out of the new portion of Essex County College for several years. And it was all free. It was funny because on the wills and estates portion, we just said to our people, look, you got to have a will, because if you don't, no matter what you have, the state will take it and use it the way they want to do it.
That's right.
So we want to empower you to use your resources, whatever you have, the way you want to do it. And let me tell you, our people, they didn't want to give up nothing. They're like, I ain't leaving nobody nothing. I don't need no will. It's like,
And now Tariq Kenny is going around the county doing that now because nobody has done that. It's probably since you've done it back then. Because I know my godmother, Carolyn Miller, used to run the program over at Essex County College, and they had and through that yellow area, it was a lot of dynamic, and probably like your program was coming out of there. But that's serious.
A lot. They really did. No, we weren't the first, and certainly not the last, but we just wanted to make our contribution to that effort, because one of the things that I know has always been important to me, and I'm sure to others, but not to treat our people as if they're just victims, but to empower them with knowledge, with the access to resources. That's what they need to make themselves agents in their own, betterment. And I hate it when we're just feeling like we're just victims, and we can't really do anything for ourselves. It's not true. Not true.
And that seems to be consistent with when you got to Rutgers and the programs that you were helping to lead, right? Like, can you tell us about how you led those programs and what some of the resistance that you got from that? Like, what are some of the lessons that we could learn, especially from the admissions programs that you were advocating for?
Yeah. Well, just quickly, let me just say before that, one of the things that helped fuel my ability to navigate through Newark and through various networks of people who would or would not be a partner was that my 3-year stint at Lucent, because Lucent Technologies gave me $14 million to spend in Newark.
Wow.
For 3 years. So that, when you come with the money, everybody gonna listen, right? It's like E.F. Hutton.
That's right.
Marcia would come in the room. They know I had a $14 million checkbook. And so with that $14 million checkbook, we made possible the Robert Treat Academy. We gave them $1 million. We made possible the Newark Leadership Fellowship with what's her name, the sister who runs that. We funded what's his name, the brother who was on Donald Trump's show. Forgive me, I can't remember a lot of things now.
What's her name? The
His
only
name, yeah.
African American woman.
Yeah.
Oh, you Randall Pinkett.
No,
You talking about
the brother, not the
Randall Pinkett. Randall.
Right, Randall Pickett. We
Mhm.
funded his first. He was doing entrepreneurial work with people in public housing units in Newark and in Boston. We funded that. We funded the what is that? Newark Conservatory with Robin Daughtery. We funded. I mean, we funded. So we funded the United Wellsburg. I funded everybody I could, with that money over 3 years. And then, after 3 years, I went back to the university.
You took $14 million and made it do $28 million worth of work. That's what you did.
We hope so. That's what we're trying to do. And then I went back to the university to run EOF. So that's so then I met people, I knew people, we had networks. So then in terms of getting more students from Newark into Rutgers-Newark, then we were working with the school system. I could get in there. We went to we targeted schools in Newark, especially the ones in the South Ward, Malcolm X, Shabazz, University, Weequahic. We were trying to get students because those are the schools that normally we didn't get in. I mean, we always got students from as you know, Jonathan, from Science High. Right. But we, the other schools we very rarely got students from, and now we're getting students from there. But the interesting thing, just as an aside about EOF, is that everybody else is getting into the EOF game. So it's not just Black and brown people. We have Asian people, and a number of other Indians. A number of people are coming in now, and we're having a harder time really convincing young Black students to get their applications in. I think they want to, but it's just getting that stuff in on time. And we haven't really been able to figure out how to do that better. We're doing better, but we need to do better. It should be understood. Every student who goes to a high school in Newark should be understood that you're going to apply for the EOF program.
And that should be something as part of our counselors that we just
absolutely
needs to be something that every
they should see that as their legacy. Right. It's their legacy. People, took over buildings so that they'd have that legacy. And people don't realize that when those 10 students took over that building at Rutgers, the governor had threatened to call out the not just the what do you call them, the National Guard, but he wanted tanks. I mean, could you imagine? They wanted tanks to come in on the campus. They had already come into Newark, but they wanted to come in on the Newark campus to get those 10, 20 kids out of Concord Hall. I mean, it was just outrageous. But that story needs to be known. And I know Roger and I had talked about this. Roger, who's the superintendent, Roger Leone, had talked about having a Newark course, a course on Newark as part of the matriculation of students in high school. That has got to happen. That's got to happen.
And especially that really connects the activism that went on to the current state of things that people fought for these students that they don't even know about.
Exactly.
And there's so much that I just want to unpack just some things that you talked about. You talked about Chen in this, and the Chen is when you talked about that, they were partially responsible for the creation of Science Park High School. I remember seeing
that's right.
Yeah, I just remember seeing the banner that talks about Chen and the creation of Science Park, basically to get more African American students into the sciences, based on the activism that went on. So we have a lot of issues that that your generation and the generation after fought for, put their bodies on the line for, and we don't necessarily recognize that many of the thinking behind EOF, the thinking behind Science Park High School, was very specifically trying to help African Americans have more opportunities. Right. And sometimes that gets lost in history, especially when the criticism is that EOF or not many Black males in science, or these things happen when we have to look at the history and the activism of why these institutions were created to begin with, and many people, and it's lost on many people.
And I have actually begged people to come in. The NAACP, all the ranking, organizations, to let us tell them what we're doing in Newark, so that then they can get feedback on how we could do it better and bigger. because at this point right now, I would say, first of all, Chin doesn't exist any longer, unfortunately. Rutgers-Newark is probably the reigning university that is doing anchor institution work in Newark, mainly with Ras Baraka, mainly with Roger Leone. And everything that, what I call table of collaboration that has been created in order to address all those reigning issues that we've been working on for years, whether it's public safety, education, entrepreneurship, arts and culture. We'd need another 2 hours just for me to talk about what Rutgers-Newark is doing in those 4 areas. And that's mainly as a result of Nancy Cantor. But even before we get to Nancy Cantor, when Norman Samuels was there, they were basically pushing EOF. EOF was the main gateway, or the main pathway, I would say, for getting students in. And at that time that I was there, we were probably 90-something% of the students who came in through EOF. And we're talking about 100 or so students every year, not a lot. And that's why when I tell you what Nancy has been able to help to do, it really is much more impactful. But those 100 students a year were mainly from Newark and greater Essex, which was more than had been before. Because there are roughly about 15,000 students who go to school at Rutgers-Newark, about 6,000 undergrad, and the rest are graduate, both masters and doctorates, because Rutgers-Newark is a research university. It's a research one university, so a lot of people don't realize that. But all that means is that about 90% of the professors who teach there have either written the books that they're teaching from, or have gotten their degrees from major scholarly institutions, and so they bring that research one rating to Rutgers-Newark. So here you have EOF, which is rolling along, and they're bringing students in there. And we had about, now we're at probably about a 75-80% graduation rate over 4 years. If we do 6 years, it's even higher. So we're one of the 50 schools in the nation that can show that we have more than a 60-65% graduation rate for Black and Brown students.
Wow.
We also are a Hispanic leading institution as well. Hispanic.
What are some of the things that you worked on to make that happen in terms of the graduation rate? I know that's a huge issue in higher education in terms of people who actually graduate in 4 to 6 years. What did you find that you needed to do in order to improve that?
I think the people who have been in EOF, especially the ones before me, because everything is a team, man. That's one of the things I say about Rutgers-Newark. It is a team-based university. Nobody is doing anything siloing, and the people who do silo, they get brought out real quickly. But at EOF, one of the things, there were several tactics and strategies that were being used. First of all, of course, we don't want the students to have to worry about money. So for the 4 years, they get tuition paid for. Secondly, we went out and got funding so that as many as possible could actually live on campus. Because one of the things we discovered that research was showing was that students who live on campus do better academically. And, not hard to understand because,
right.
You're right there in the culture. You're being able to learn how to manage and organize your work. As well as
distractions.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because so many of our students, as you know, are coming from environments either in the home or in the community that make it very difficult for them to stay focused. I mean, we've had a lot of students who had to leave. And then, so one of the other things we do is we stay in touch with people. We stay stuck on them, if you will. They can't, if they're not there for a certain period of time, they're going to get calls. They may even get somebody to come over their house. Nobody does that, except those people who are, in this particular campaign of work, of struggle to make sure that these young people get a college degree and finish. The other thing was mentors. So one of the during my tenure, one of the things I was really happy about, and I was hoping that we could replicate it. We had discovered that the students who did better in biology and in the sciences, they did better all around in their academic work. So one of the faculty members, and at that time, the faculty was very close to EOF. We had our own EOF faculty, which was unheard of. And so it was called Academic Foundations.
Foundation. Yep.
Remember that? Yeah. And so one of the faculty member who was in the foundations department had come up with an idea that if we had a secondary biology course, in other words, those students who were taking science and biology, they would take a separate course that he would teach that would give them additional immersion in the sciences. And we went to Ray Chambers' organization and asked him if he would give us the money to do a pilot, because that was one of the tactics we would always use. We need to do a pilot. Let's see if this works, you know. And so they gave us the money. We did the pilot. And what happened was the EOF students did better than students who were going regularly to biology and didn't take the second course.
Wow.
So we said, oh, we got something here. So we figured that if we could get the university to buy into that, everybody who comes in through EOF, and even students who weren't EOF but who felt like they could, you know, benefit from the additional academic work, should have an opportunity to do it. Right. That was our argument. But we weren't able to get it funded we weren't able to get it funded. And so the university didn't have the money to continue it, but it was a pilot that worked. We knew it worked. Now, that was one thing. The other thing was that we took the students who did take that course and used them to do an after-school program in the sciences for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Why? Because the middle school, the research was showing us that if we could get those students in middle school, that would change their whole trajectory in high school. So we had a program called MOST, Middle School Opportunities in Science and Technology. And those students, again, were being taught by these faculty members I was telling you about. They were just amazing, these faculty people. And they were being taught biology. And what happened, I wish we had chronicled this, but I know probably if I could find my papers, we could show that to people, but I'm sure they're all gone now. But those students were going back into their classrooms, the 6th and 7th and 8th grades, and they were teaching things that their own teachers didn't know.
Oh, wow.
We know this because the teachers told us this. So what happened was we tried to create a service, sort of a learning service department in those schools so that the students who went back could become teaching assistants to those teachers and help them teach those courses to everybody else, because we wanted everybody else to learn what they were learning. At the end of the day, we had this MOST, Middle School Opportunities in Science and Technology, had a fair, and we invited all their parents, we invited the mayor, we invited city council people. We had set it up like a real science fair, and we got those students lab coats, and they had tables where they were explaining the various aspects of biology, the various aspects of the body, whatever they had learned. They had their table and exhibits to show it. It was amazing. And if you recall, our brother Moses, who just died, Moses, what was his name? Robert Moses?
Bob Moses.
Bob Moses, right.
Brilliant.
Back in the 70s, Bob Moses had come up with a program that he called the Algebra Project.
And he was everybody's background. Bob Moses was a legend of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, legendary organizer, SNCC, was key in helping Fannie Lou Hamer form the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. There's some Fannie Lou Hamer links to Rutgers-Newark too. I'll let you bring them out as we go along. But I just wanted to put a pin in that because Bob deserves that footnote.
No, I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you did, because he's another one of the legends of the movement that a lot of people, that our children don't really know about it. He should be on their lips, you know. All these people, we need a Hall of Famer thing, you know, some kind of museum in Newark to put these people's names out there. They need to know who these people are. So when Bob did this MOST project, I saw it as sort of a legacy of what Bob was doing with algebra. In fact, we tried to do that in the late 70s in the after school programs that we were doing. I think it was either out of POP. Or it was out of another program called Project Schools. Do you remember Project Schools?
Wow.
I'm glad you're asking me about this because I'm losing my memory bank on this. But
even you mentioning those things and mentioning those various programs, I mean, that's important. I remember some of those things from just being a student and hearing
Exactly.
about programs,
Exactly.
right?
In the South Ward, especially, we were at a church that was around the corner from Mary's house. It was a Presbyterian church, and they allowed us to use that church every Saturday. And we were doing a version of the algebra project there, except that we focused on engineering. And oh my God, was that program so impactful? So, and those kids, they see, because one of the theories that we were advancing was this: our kids don't learn the way the traditional schools want them to learn. That's not how they learn. And so, once you put them
they get it, they take off.
They take off. They're brilliant. I mean, we knew that all along. You know, all these young people are brilliant. But we don't get a chance to see that, which is skipping over a little bit more to Jonathan's arena. That's why debate was so important, because as Jonathan knows, debate enabled students who may have been making C's and D's to learn how to marshal information and facts in such a critical way that they could take themselves up to higher levels of academic preparedness. It's just unbelievable. And, you know, we tried, you know, Brent Ferran, who was the progenitor of debate. He was the visionary behind debate, started at Science High School. And it's just started, thank God, at a time when my daughter was there. So that's how I knew about it. And I wanted to get involved. So I became a parent in debate. And I've been working with debate for now 30 years. But we have been talking till we're blue in the face about why debate must become an academic trajectory for our students, because it could change the whole notion of what academic preparedness is. It's just, I don't know if you remember the story, Jonathan, where one of the, this is at Science High School, I think, before you started teaching there. But and by the way, everybody, Jonathan was a menace and a terror. We called him a terrorist. They called him a terrorist on the debate circuit, because you know, nationally they debated. Jonathan debated Roger, Leon, they all debated, and you know, Newark was so fierce, you know, in the national arena that they had reputations. But they're just bringing it down to the level of, you know, young people. There was a student at Science High School who wanted to join the debate team, but he was in a gang, and he had told us he was in a gang. He wore the colors and everything. And Brent and I and some of the other people on the board, we said, well, look, we have to really think about this. You know, we don't want to turn them away, but we don't want to bring that culture into the debate team. So, because most of the people on the debate team were kind of like nerds. Not that Jonathan is a nerd, but, you know, they were people who, you know, who really, once they learned how to think about the use of information, they got excited about it. And so he wanted to be on. So what we told him, we said, look, we'll let you on, but you can't debate. What you'll be is you will be a researcher for the students who are debating. You'll be one of their, but to make a long story short, in 2 years, this boy not only have went from being a researcher to being a speaker, but he has stopped dealing with the gang colors. And ultimately, this guy went to William Patterson University, got a BA, and then went to Emory to get a master's. I mean, you can't make these stories up. I can't make them up.
Yeah, that's one of the things they say about debate is that a really good debater can come from either the top of the class or the bottom of the class, right?
Yep, that's right.
Because if you have issues with authority, you're a great debater because you think critically, naturally, right? Like, so kids who end up getting in trouble actually would be some of the best debaters. So that's some of the things to think about. Right.
I mean, that program, we begged the mayor of Newark to have a parade when our students won the National Urban Debate League. Remember?
Yes,
her name. She went to science as well, and she's teaching. Actually,
she went to university. She went to
university. That's right. She went to university. And just as a statistic that you guys can know and banter around at some point, 75% of the people who take debate come back to Newark. And they either come back to teach, or they work in some nonprofit, or they are doing entrepreneurial work. I mean, it's amazing what debate does. You know, most of the debaters at Rutgers-Newark who come from Newark schools, all of them, they're all, you know, they came back to do just this. You know, I mean, they're excited about this. Really.
No, that is some of the good things about what we do, right? Like whether it be Roger Leon, whether it be a lot of other people who are teachers or administrators.
Yes, that's right.
They, like even the chief of staff of Newark Public Schools, former debater, Melissa Cooper, who's a professor at Rutgers.
Yes, and she's killing it. I mean, Melissa is now on the national scene.
Right, she was on the documentary with Henry Louis Gates.
Exactly.
And
a former debater. Now imagine if we had been doing parades for all you guys when you and Roger were, it just became annual celebration. Because why? Because there are smart people in Newark. It used to be that Newark was considered, a place where dumb people were, people. This is how, what's his name used to make fun of us on the late night TV show, Johnny Carson. There were no smart people, in Rutgers-Newark. I mean, people have no idea what is here.
It's interesting because I got a phone call that the popular television show This Is Us, one of their subplots is one of the kids was a debater in Newark and had to be taken to debate practice in Newark. And I was like, wow, that means somebody who was a writer.
Somebody is transmitting something, right?
Yeah. Well,
right.
I forgot the actor. He does a lot of donation to the arts community here. I know to Luna Stage down here in Orange and West Orange. I can't think of one of the lead actors' name, but he does a lot of work locally here in Jersey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think Newark got a lot going on. But Vice Chancellor, you brought us the 1619 project on the afternoon to NJPAC, and it was probably one of the best discussions that you had an opportunity to sit down and participate in. And Nicole Hannah-Jones, I guess I'll say this. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
It was awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
I was glad to have been a part of that. I was like, oh my God, this woman, and we all met behind stage, and she's just as homespun as she wants to be. I mean, she, despite all of the stellar work that she's done and what she's done to advance, our struggle, in the area of historical understanding, it's just been phenomenal. And yet she's just very real, real down to earth. And it was an amazing discussion. And let me just mention that I'm having a discussion. I'm moderating a discussion again with Raz Baraka and Nancy Canner. It's going to be in September at NJPAC.
Okay.
Again. So I'm really excited about that, because those two people are driving a lot of the revolutionary momentum in Newark. And let me tell you, it was Nancy Cantor who came up with the idea of something called Run to the Top, because she was saying we have to be about social mobility. So she took her money, the discretionary funds that she has that normally would be used for other things, and created a program that said that any student in Newark and coming from any and transferring from any community college whose household income is $65,000 or less will go to Rutgers-Newark free. I mean, and that changed the game. I'm telling you, it changed the game. And so we have spent probably since that program started, I think 4 years ago, over $18 million. And we're still, and even if we run out, Nancy's like, I'm gonna find the money from somewhere, because these students now, this generation of students, listen to me, are going to graduate with no debt. With no debt.
Right. And I think it was Superintendent Leon who just advertised this. Is it the class of 21 that like over 20 students graduated with an associate's degree? I think I remember Superintendent Leon doing an article about that, and that's big. And more and I know because we've talked about it here in Orange, and since Superintendent Lee, but more people need to do it. And if they're doing it, they need to talk, because that's a big. If you can graduate high school and at the same time have your associate's degree, that's major. That is absolutely major.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, all these things are working together. From Run to the Top to the dual enrollment program, right? What you're talking about, to the program we have with Essex County College, and we're trying to perfect it, where students automatically would get into Rutgers-Newark based on the course that they took 2 years. And let's not forget that Rutgers-Newark was the only university that designed a program, a pathway program for people who are incarcerated, informally incarcerated, to be able to to go to college at Rutgers-Newark.
Listen, we had some of the graduates on the program, and
oh, good. Did you have Tia Ryan?
We had
Tia.
We had Antone Henshaw on, and maybe Chino. I can't think. We had 2 persons on, but yes. I know Tone is on his way to doing his doctorate now. But he, I want to say he did as far as master's behind the wall, and it's all through Rutgers. And was it 2 years ago? They had one of the largest graduating classes at behind the wall, through Rutgers.
Listen, we should just call it the People's University, because after all, Mr. Rutgers was a slaveholder. So it's not like we're invested in that name. But, I'm just trying to say that, it's in Newark that university is doing the work that it's doing. It's because it's in Newark that it's doing the work that it's doing. And it's because Nancy Cannon and the other senior leaders there have said, look, we're not just in Newark, we're of Newark.
And one thing that it seems happened is that when you were first at Rutgers and the work that you did and the work that you're doing now, it seems like they're bookends, right? In terms of community involvement, community investment, and the way that you're talking about the programs that Nancy Cantor has put together. The one thing that during that time, and I saw at the middle of this, because remember, and I just want to give this big shout out. Ed actually just texted me and was like, make sure you don't forget to point out that the only reason why All Politics Are Local is still on is because of Marcia Brown and the work that you did to make sure that we were, at Rutgers and a part of that, right? So it was really cool to see when you, it's almost like a new phase of your career when Nancy Cantor came. And there was almost like this renaissance of these community programs. Can you talk to us about what that was like during that time? Because something tells me that this stretch where there are so many different community programs, and there's whether it be Race to the Top, the focus on Newark, the partnerships in Newark, what was the thinking behind that? And can you give us more detail on that as we get to the last part of the interview?
There's sometimes when you think that, you're so old, you can't really learn anything, which is a mistake. So, we should always be humble enough to feel like whatever space, God has put us in, that there's something to be learned and something to teach. So when Nancy has been here going on her 7th year, and when she came here, I was actually going to leave Rutgers then because I felt like I had done whatever I could do. And she asked me to consider staying. She said, look, take all the time you want, but I really need you here to work with us. And one of the things I did in agreeing to stay was recognizing how she understands the necessity for collaboration, how she understands the necessity for the university to have an ascendancy and how it relates to the community and its resources, or rather, I should say, how the university's resources are used to build the community. And it was she who came up with this slogan, we're not just in Newark, we're of Newark. That changed the game. And so she started to from a senior team that only had one Black person on it every year, me, and then before me was Jim Ramsey, and before me, Ray Smith, because I always had that one person. We went from the one person in there to she has her inner circle. I would say it's about 10 people, and we could count the number of white people on 2 fingers. So it may be a little bit more. I may be just exaggerating, but we're predominantly Black and brown. We went from all white deans to having all deans of color. And the first woman dean, the first woman of color dean, and the first woman of color dean. In fact, we have 2, one Asian and one Black. This is after 75 years of history. And then the third thing is what I call those tables of collaboration that I referenced earlier. Nancy said, look, all of us we have to turn ourselves into, in the old days, we would have just called that, sort of the people who are working in the struggle. We were all comrades. But in effect, that's what our tables of collaboration are. We have a table of collaboration internally where about 17 of us talk about about the 75 projects that everybody's working on. As I said, we got the Newark Public Safety Collaboration. That's a table of collaboration started at Rutgers-Newark. We have the Newark Coalition of, the Newark City of Learning Collaboration, which is the 9-member universities in Newark under the aegis of Rutgers University Newark. In other words, we house that. And the goal is to create an ecosystem where everybody's going to school, everybody's able to, be mobile throughout those 9 universities. And we're building this ecosystem from K through 20. That started at Rutgers-Newark. We have the New Jersey STEP with the prisons. That started at Rutgers-Newark. We have the Newark Anchor Collaboration, which is all of the downtown businesses, which was Nancy's idea, because she said we need a think tank and we need to have a place where those companies are showing their commitment, showing how they're committed to doing racial equity. I mean, it's so much I can't even begin to tell you. We have a special program we started at Rutgers-Newark called the University Assistant Programs, where we work in 3 high schools and we bring professors in those high schools. We have writing clinics in those high schools. And then all those students are given special dispensation to come to Rutgers. It is so much I can't even begin to tell you. So that's what I've been doing with Nancy and her team for the last 6 years, 7 years, that 6 years, and now she's going in her 7th year that I stayed there to work with her. And it's just, we are doing so much that, I just got finished telling Nancy, we have to sort of bring it down because everybody's just sort of overwhelmed with the work that we're doing. We need to, because with COVID presented, we didn't even stop doing COVID, people. We did not even stop doing COVID.
Wow.
So this just shows you the level of commitment that she brings to that university. And it ain't easy because, we're part of a 4 apartheid university, with the one on the Hill, the medical school, dental school, which has lots of money. And then we have Camden, and we have New Brunswick, and then we have the nursing school. And then we have the central office, which is, now we have this Black president. And so we're subject to a lot of different dictates that, don't always make it easy for us to do what we want to do. But we have a great relationship with the Essex delegation. They support Nancy. They support Rutgers-Newark. Senator Ron Rice, Senator Teresa Ruiz, Senator Assemblywoman Myla Jacey, and all the rest of them in Newark and in the greater have supported us. I mean, we couldn't have done what we've done without them. So this is where Rutgers-Newark is at. It's only going to get stronger. And now, like I said, Ras is has Rutgers-Newark working with him on the downtown Kawada project, on the new museum that he's building. Kawida, I'm sorry, I always get them mixed up like Kawida, right? I'm glad you told me so now I can tell Nancy, because she's like, am I pronouncing that right? I was like, I think so. I wasn't sure. Kawida, so now I got it. Okay. So that's so we wish the other universities were able to do as much too, because we need the help. Rutgers-Newark can't do all of it. I'm not saying we are, just in case Joel is listening to me over at NJIT. So I'm not saying we're doing it all, that nobody else is doing anything. I'm just talking about what we're doing.
That's been a unique lift. Because I just to as we wind down, my time was right before you came in, right?
Yeah.
When it was still a commuter campus, right?
Yeah.
We had all those struggles, right? I can remember when Norman Samuels was not as liberal as we now look back on that side of his legacy, right?
Right.
My first sit-in was in his office.
Yeah, I bet.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've come quite a ways, but still, because of the broader,
by demand, yeah, nobody's giving us nothing by demand.
Yeah. Everything is we ain't got nothing without a fight.
Right. That's right. One day maybe. And I always say everything that I've ever done, or I'm from the ought to school, because James oh God, what's James' last name? He was my mentor, the National Organization for the American Revolution.
James
No, James. Oh, I can't believe I'm blanking on him.
We both having the same senior moment, straight out of Detroit.
I know.
Oh, James and his wife.
Yeah, Grace and James Boggs.
James Boggs.
So one of the things Jimmy used to say all the time was that, you know, nobody should give you anything when you're doing what you ought to do. And I agree with that. That's, you know, and I grew up, I from the country, you know, outside of Detroit. I grew up in a country town, and that's sort of how our people were in those days. You know, you didn't get praises for things that you were supposed to do. It was the ought to, you know. You get praise if you went beyond that, but no, you know, this is what we ought to do. This is what we ought to do. Imagine if everybody had that ought to, you know, focus. Maybe we would, you know, do so much more.
Marcia, I always say that I said that your daughter Karma Brown should write a book for the stuff that she does as an emergency room doctor. I would say the same thing for you. You could have 2 books, right? Just based on the things that you've done in your career. I've learned so much that I did not know about you in these 2 interviews. And just, you know, from Lucent to the community activism to you giving out $14 million. Like that seems like a whole thing in and of itself. So I'd like to thank you for the stuff that you've done to affect multiple parts of my life, even if, you know, you might not have even fully known it at the time, or I might not have known it at the time. So thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Ed, what's going on? What's up?
What's going on, Marcia? What's good?
Good to see you. Been a long time. Oh, my God.
Hey.
Well, I'm glad you guys are still on the air. You know, keep doing what you're doing. And,
Ed, you got to have the last word.
Well, don't let the vice chancellor, I know she's a part of the founding part of this radio show, but does she get the most important question, or she gets to bypass the question?
Oh, well, yeah.
You
haven't answered this before, but you did answer this last time. But just you know, who is your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group?
Are you kidding? I don't even understand what they be saying.
I think that's what you said last time.
Let me just see. I mean, I like when I read the words. Of course, I like Tupac stuff because I thought his stuff was really, you know, very deeply substantive. You know, but I can't. I don't really know enough. I have to go back to the Motown. You know, I'm the Motown girl.
Well, Vice Chancellor, go back. Go in and do Lauryn Hill, Nobody, and do the lyrics from Nobody, because her lyrics from Nobody.
Oh yeah. No, those. Now I'm glad you reminded me about Lauryn Hill. Yeah, I liked her a lot. I liked her definitely. Yeah, she has a new single out with Nas called Nobody, so you'll appreciate that. Oh, all right. And I like Erykah Badu. Is she hip hop?
Yeah, but she just kind of messed up. She went to she's up in Martha's Vineyard, and President Obama told her not to take pictures, but she took pictures and posted them.
Oh my Lord! What about India Arie? She's good too, right?
Yeah. R&B.
Oh, she's R&B.
Still R&B.
No, Erykah is hip hop as well. Erykah's definitely hip. The Philly, yes.
Her husband, Andre 3000, yes.
Okay.
But it's okay.
Well, I know there was some people. MC Hammer, right? He was a hip hop, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah, I liked him too. Yeah.
Okay.
So that does that keep me in the? I'm all right now.
You were good with your pop. You were good with pop.
Okay.
I think that was it.
Everybody, thank you so much.
Y'all
Vice Chancellor.
Thank you so much.
Everybody stay lifted now. Amen.
Well, Marcia, I just want to add my thank yous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to you. So I just want to add mine as well. And just say thanks for really all of the help you gave us in terms of helping us create Newark Community Radio. So, you know, we've been going on at this now for almost, believe it or not, Marcia, 12 years.
What?
Wow.
12 years. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm older than I thought.
And so
Lord have mercy.
Thank you to you publicly.
Oh my Lord.
This would have ended, you know.
Well, that is wonderful. You guys deserve a hand clap. That is wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Bringing news to the people.
Yeah.
So there we go.
And so we wouldn't be here 12 years later. I just want you all to know, if it had not been for Marcia standing with us, so she will always be a part of all politics of local.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
She's
I really
always in the
appreciate that.
background, keeping
But
us on our
listen-
P's and Q's too.
Yeah,
That's-
absolutely.
Thank you, Marcia.
All right. Thank you all. Listen,
All
stay
right.
lifted. Okay.
Thank you,
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yep, that's another weekend. All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. And as a correction to me, our DJ said Erica is more hip hop than most R&B artists. So yeah, okay, I could give you that because DJ Rhino says so. Then I got to back down. He's DJ Rhino. So
First Jada, now Erica. There you go.
Jada.
First Jada.
Oh, Jada
Kiss.
Kiss. You're right. Yeah. Yes. When you say Jada, the first thing I think of is Jada Will Smith's wife.
Yeah, you would. Yeah. I know Rakia was with us, but we seem to have lost her.
Yes, she was backstage, but we wanted to put her back in. But just we're glad we had Marcia Brown on because she meant so much to the Newark community for so long, and has been doing so much. And she's like an unsung hero
personally.
Yo, that history is ridiculous. Yeah. And you know what, too? And she kind of said it, but she didn't finish her thought. But that history needs to be told to our young people today because they fought a lot so that the people can have today. And we need to pay attention to that,
Absolutely.
Some of them damn fights.
Well, welcome, Rakia Lumumba to All Politics Are Local.
Thank you so much. Can y'all hear me okay?
We can hear you okay. Make sure you're driving. Make sure you're careful, though. We value you.
Thank you. I have definitely parked, and I had to move myself again because the internet was really bad. The service was really bad where I was. So
okay.
Good to be back on.
Well, good to have you back on this week. So what is going on in Jackson?
Oh, in Jackson, we're still dealing with a very increased heightened rate of COVID here. We've had a number of deaths due to the new strain of COVID, the new variant. And so really trying to navigate that. We have all of the major hospitals in the state of Mississippi reside within Jackson. And so when our hospitals are filled with COVID patients, it impacts also the rest of the state's access to medical care for other things as well. And so one of our major hospitals, the University Medical Center, has created an additional outdoor medical facility within one of the garages that they own because we have so many patients coming in. So it's pretty serious here. It's pretty serious here. One of our sheriffs, a black sheriff, was just elected this past year, died. He was the former chief of police. He died of COVID complications after being vaccinated. And so we have his service tomorrow. He's just one of many that we've known that have passed these past couple of weeks.
So in Jackson, there are people who have it seems like there are people who've had the vaccine and are still being gravely affected by this. Are you finding that is going on a lot? Is that a rare case?
It seems I don't want to give false data. I can only speak anecdotally right now based on the number of people that we have been in direct communication with. This week alone, I know at least 4 people that have contracted the variant and are vaccinated themselves.
Wow.
Including medical professional.
So this is actually this is actually changing a lot of the way people are thinking about this. Is there still a push? And is it still a necessary push to get people who are unvaccinated vaccinated? Given what has been some of the response?
Well, definitely the state is pushing. I mean, we here in Jackson have been encouraging people to get vaccinated because at the very least, the hope is that the vaccination will reduce the impact that it'll have on especially vulnerable populations where we'll see less deaths. And so the governor, for the first time, has actually encouraged people to consider vaccinations because the numbers are just growing in terms of people who are unvaccinated who are dying from the new variant. And so it's definitely something that we're pushing. We never let go of our mask mandate in Jackson. And so for the most part, people have been definitely still required to mask up. Definitely, I think, business entities began to become a little lax after a while, but now I think people are becoming more serious again about it, realizing the grave toll it is taking on people.
So, Rakia, is this your second, like when the whole U.S., so to speak, was battling COVID, were your numbers high and then it went down, and are you high again? Or this is your first surge, or, like, were your hospitals filled to capacity before, during the first outbreak of COVID?
Yeah, can you all hear me okay, or am I breaking up?
Yeah, we can hear you very well.
Okay, great. Sorry. So initially we had, so Mississippi as a state has always had higher numbers. For our county of Hinds County, which Jackson is located in, we have had relatively decent numbers, not too high, not too low, at a median level for our city being the largest city in the state, the only metropolitan city within the state. But because we had very strict rules around masks, around social distancing and things like that, we were able to keep our numbers pretty steady, not too high. Definitely weren't on the low end, but weren't extremely high in Jackson itself. But the state overall has, since day one, had very high numbers of COVID and high numbers of COVID deaths. Like I said, the majority of Mississippi is rural. And so people normally have to drive hours to get to Jackson to get to a larger medical facility. And so, or they are flown in on helicopters and things like that. And so, one thing I'll say is that the federal support, federal aid to communities, to rural states like Mississippi is really, really important. It's really critical. And even if you have to bypass the state government to give to municipalities or to counties, it's something that we really want to push the federal government to do, because even without COVID, Mississippi has some of the worst health outcomes in the nation. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we are predominantly rural a state without many of the infrastructure necessities that it takes to have a better quality of life. So that includes infrastructure such as piping, electricity, internet service, broadband service, and most importantly, it also includes health access to adequate health care. And so we're seeing COVID really, really, really make that a very stark reality for folks. It helps them see very clearly.
So COVID balloons the health and the health disparities that were already there. COVID just, as with the rest of the country, just makes it so much more noticeable and worse.
That's right. Prior to COVID, Mississippians, the infant mortality rate and mortality rate of women who give in childbirth, especially Black women, was the highest in the nation. And that's just an example of, how bad we need support. We need support.
And when you mention infrastructure, we talk about the national infrastructure bill that's been passed, or that's passed the Senate, but they're trying to pass. You mentioned that there needs to be something that bypasses states' governments. Like if the federal government gave the money just to Mississippi, it might not get to Black people in Jackson or in other rural areas. Can you expound on that? Like the need to target funding not to the state, but to local municipalities?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest examples of the failure of the state to respond to the needs of the people was Medicaid expansion. When we saw Medicaid expansion be approved state after state after state in a number of places, Mississippi refused, even with an incentive offer from the federal government, refused to expand Medicaid, refused to take on the federal dollars. So as a result, many poor Mississippians never received the medical assistance that they need. And so when we're talking right now, one of the most recent examples that we have was just this past February, when we had our winter storm crisis that caused a significant water crisis in central Mississippi, specifically in Jackson and a number of rural communities, about 21 communities in total throughout the central Mississippi geographical area. And, you know, the city of Jackson, just as an example, has for decades been requesting from the state adequate funding to actually repair piping, replace lead pipes, fix deteriorating water systems, sewage system linings underneath the ground, and to help repair bridges and other roadways that have been deteriorating for 40, 50 years. Some say even 100 years if you go back far enough, that hadn't adequately been kept up, maintained, and funding hadn't been provided to the city ever since it had become a predominantly Black led city back in 1997. And so what we've seen is that finally, after making national news, we saw the federal government say, well, we're going to step over the state government who has denied you all this relief year after year. And we're going to send you down millions of dollars to go ahead and begin the immediate repairs that are needed just to restore people's water right now. That then pushed the state government to actually give something, right? Where we hadn't seen them really give adequately in a long time. And even what they gave wasn't adequate, right? But it was something more than what they had denied us for the last year.
So to be clear, in the latest crisis, the federal government did just what you were suggesting. They like in the recent water crisis, like this winter, the federal government bypassed the state government and gave money directly to Jackson. Is that what happened?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm.
And was that just simply through talking? Was that just an executive order? Was that just through just working through FEMA to give money directly there? Or like, how did that work? Was that just Biden was like, hey, this has to happen? Or was it through like congressional delegations? How did that bypass happen? I'm just asking.
It happened definitely through advocates talking directly to Biden and seeing into the Vice President Harris, and seeing the need. At the same time, they were already talking about this infrastructure bill. So I think it was good timing as well. It was unfortunate timing. We didn't want to have to go through a water crisis that left many residents without water for over 5 weeks. But it was timing. Timing helped us. Timing was on our side. They were talking about infrastructure. We were a prime example of a need and a prime example of state neglect.
If the infrastructure bill passes, will that actually will that go a long way to solving the water infrastructure problem, the problem with clean drinking water in Jackson? And if not, what else would need to be done on that issue?
It will absolutely help. We haven't received, outside of what the federal government did, we hadn't received much help at all over the past few decades. So it'll absolutely offer some significant aid that we need here. But in addition to that, we need states to be held responsible for adequately funding, directing the budget towards these infrastructure needs. Jackson had a lot of attention because it is the largest city in the state of Mississippi.
Right.
But there were numerous rural communities outside of Jackson that had the same water infrastructure issues and did not receive the same support, and they need it. And just because they're rural doesn't mean that they don't deserve to have adequate water, adequate plumbing systems, and not be subjected to unhealthy living conditions.
So even if the current infrastructure bill happens, it will help Jackson, but there are some serious questions about whether it will help rural areas that are affected by this.
And Jonathan, let's just take the time to introduce and welcome Reverend Tiller. He's here, Rakia's partner on the vote, and just say hey.
Hey, welcome and welcome. But just to clarify that last question about the rural areas, does the infrastructure bill, like to your knowledge, if the infrastructure bill passes, will that help? Will that solve the problems in rural areas, or do they need more special attention that's getting ignored? Hello? I think you are frozen. All right, I think
she's frozen. Rakia, oh, here she comes.
Okay.
Rakia, can you hear us?
Were you able to hear the question?
So unfortunately, my internet is going in and out right now. Can you all?
Were you
hear
able
me?
to hear the last question? I can hear you now, but could you hear the question? Like if the Okay, I think you are frozen again.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to
Reverend Tiller. So we'll go over to Reverend Tiller and say, you have a new mayor yet, or should I wait till November?
Oh, right. Do
I have to wait? And you have your first woman governor. Oh my gosh, you got so much going on, sir.
Right. Talk to us about New York City and New York State.
Well, there's a lot going on. First of all, let me just say, lastly, I enjoyed listening to Rakia, and I have been hearing, the critics of the infrastructure bill have been talking about how this is not a COVID bill, but this is something that Democrats have wanted to do. But I always say Reverend Jesse L. Jackson in 1984 gave a perfect prescription for what we need to do to stimulate the American economy. He said, reinvest in the cities, rebuild our bridges, our tunnels, infrastructure. And let me just say that there's no way this bill would have gone as far as it has, and there's no way that it will not pass without being bipartisan, because there are a lot of people in this, Republican and Democrat, that need stuff and want stuff in this bill. And so COVID has provided a perfect opportunity, but it's a big victory for Biden, and it's a big victory for hopefully for our cities if it goes through unabated. So that's a good thing. Now, New York, there's a lot going on. I think Eric Adams will be elected. That's my prediction. That's been my candidate from the beginning. I've worked with him for over 35 years, nearly 35 years. But I will say this, it's going to be a much tighter race than people think.
Really?
I think that there's going to be a lot of support for Curtis Lee. Well, people forget that Rudy Giuliani was not supposed to beat David Dinkins in that second election. And in fact, the first time Giuliani ran against Dinkins, he almost beat him. And so, we have a lot of ethnic strongholds that do not want to see a black candidate. I mean, Eric Adams is unique in that because he represented Brooklyn, he has a lot of ethnic white support. And because he was a former police officer, he has a certain amount of that support baked in. But I will tell you this, that support was based upon him running against a field of de Blasio-like liberals. Now, in this race, I think he's going to prevail, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think.
Yeah, because it's actually
Now,
structured law and order versus grassroots law and order, correct? Like vigilante sort of
yeah,
law and order. Yeah.
now, right,
Mhm.
exactly. Now it's between Curtis Sliwa, who has arguably, I mean, a dubious background because a lot of stuff that he's supposed to have done was lore, but there's no doubt Curtis Sliwa has dedicated himself since the 70s to fighting crime in the city, and if anybody has a spiel or a narrative that says he's doing that. Now, in my view, Curtis is a lightweight. He has not proven himself as Eric has in many different fields of endeavor. But again, the voters will decide. I know Eric is going to prevail, but I don't want black folks to sleep. They got to get out to vote because this is not going to be a cakewalk. This is New York City, and those enclaves in Staten Island, Queens, Brooklyn, Upper West Side, Upper East Side, a lot of them will surprisingly give Curtis a lot of support.
Now, mainstream media is talking about how Eric Adams was a blow to progressives, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. There's just this narrative that's going on. I know that you have a particular perspective on that. What do you think about how this is being portrayed? They're almost like saying that Eric Adams is like a conservative or like a Joe Biden Democrat.
And
I
that's
keep
nonsense.
hearing this, but one of the reasons why we like having all of you on is because you have very valuable different perspectives.
I mean, that's nonsense. I mean, first of all, Eric, yes, he's been an elected official in Brooklyn. And what people have to understand is, other than Bedford-Stuyvesant, and that's changing, other than East New York and Brownsville, Brooklyn, if you're a politician in Brooklyn, you have a very diverse constituency. Brooklyn is the most diverse borough. It's perhaps the most diverse county in the United States of America. I mean, so you have to deal with Russians. You have to deal with Arabs and Jews, et cetera, especially when you represent the places that Eric has represented, Caribbean brothers and sisters, as well as African Americans. So, Eric is a politician, and he's a savvy politician. I've always said he's going to serve all of his people, but he's also going to serve us. But for the young folks, just to blanket indict him because he was a former police officer, they don't have the history. They don't know the times that he spent standing against Giuliani. They don't know the courage of the man who was on the force standing up against police brutality. So I think that is a false narrative that Eric Adams is a blow to progressives. He is a progressive in the same way Sharpton reminded the young people, you didn't invent progressivism. Every black freedom fighter and struggler is a progressive. We just have to be careful who defines being a progressive and what that means. But I think Eric Adams is someone who the black community can trust and be confident that he's going to advocate for us as well. So yeah, I don't like that narrative because people like Greg Meeks, Hakeem Jeffries, people like Yvette Clarke, Andrea Stewart Cousins in the legislature, Tish James. I mean, these are seasoned African-American politicians that come from the hood, the community. So our vision of progressive is different than someone like AOC that grew up in the suburbs and, as a young person. And we can work together. There's synergy. There are things that we can collaborate on. But we're not going for name calling, and you're not going to outflank 35 years of progressive work just because you call yourself a progressive and you just got out of school 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Reverend Siller. Oh, that was good. Rakia didn't hear what you said earlier about the infrastructure. Can you go back and just repeat what you said about the infrastructure, but speaking to those group of quote unquote progressive, and I don't know if you read about their threat to hold up the infrastructure bill if certain things aren't done. And I don't know if you and Rakia have some thoughts about that. And everything is not for the public. Like if you had some concerns, is this a thing that you need to fight in public, or maybe go back and you know, I mean, because it seems like AOC and them, and I understand it, but everything I just don't believe is for the public.
Well, also moderates are the
Well,
ones
you
who
know,
are who today have been threatening as well. So
Okay,
the
good.
moderates have put out their threat about not passing it unless certain conditions are met as well.
Okay, Jonathan.
But I mean, that just happened today. I mean,
Well,
they took
Okay,
it out. So,
okay.
like, moderates are like, unless this passes first, which I really don't understand.
Go ahead. Yeah.
But,
So,
but for Conrad and Miss Lamumba and Reverend Tiller.
Well, I was just gonna say, that, you know, it's horse trading. I mean, let's be. I believe in being honest with my community. I mean, it's horse trading. It's political horse trading, and everybody's trying to get something. And you know, that's just the process. But I think that this is going to be a huge bipartisan victory for Biden. And you know, every constituency has to fight for what they think is important. But ultimately, politics is about the possible. I mentioned earlier, Rakia missed that part, but you know, I was so happy to hear what she was saying is going on in Jackson, because it was the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson in 1984 that said at the Democratic Convention in San Francisco that we need to the formula for America's economic success is to reinvest, rebuild the cities, rebuild our infrastructure, to put people back to work, and also keep us competitive and keep our bridges and tunnels and roads in good condition. So, you know, I'm happy to see it come to fruition. It's interesting that COVID created an opportunity, but hey, it's politics. It's the art of the possible. And this is hopefully going to sail through. And you know, I'm not dismayed at all by what I see. And don't let me forget to get to Cuomo. I know Rakia wants to jump in.
Yeah. No, I'm ready for you to get to Cuomo. I don't have too much to add. You know, I mean, I think the reality is that I want the progressives to push. I want them to push as hard as they can to get something that is going to really push us towards some real radical change towards our infrastructure, which will only improve our quality of life. You know, I'm from the mindset, I'm really trying to move our people and all people towards a more democratic process that actually puts the power in the hands of the grassroots, in the hands of the masses of our people to make decisions. And so that means that we have to become a little more educated. And we know that when you really push, right, for something major, for something big, for something that seems so big it's unattainable, that at the very least, you're going to get something that is actually going to, at the very least, help us in the immediate to change the horrible conditions that we're experiencing now. When we go in with a moderate position, we get little to nothing as a result. And so I do want them to push. I want them to push. But I also want some results. And so push without results isn't helpful.
Inside, outside. That's got to be.
So Cuomo.
Yeah, I mean, a mighty tree has fallen. You know, again, as a New Yorker, you know, I have never been a fan of Andrew Cuomo. I have never been a fan of Mario Cuomo. People forget we were fighting Mario.
You mean Dad, the prison builder?
We were fighting them in the 80s and 90s.
That's
and
right.
It was with great dismay that I would hear my sisters around the country talking about how fine Cuomo is. And then I hear black people talking about he was saving America. He was selling a $5 million book. Elders were dying in nursing homes because he was in with the lobby for nursing homes, putting sick COVID patients in nursing homes. This guy was bad news. He was a bully. He always has been. And so, you know, the African American community, he used us, played us like a grand piano. And finally, Sister Tish James, you know, held him accountable. And I salute her, because far too often when these so-called Democratic fair-headed boys do stuff, often it's black folks defending them. This is not about trying to bring a man down. I mean, we got to play the game by one set of rules. a lot of women have said that he's been appropriate with them. I mean, I think he has a right certainly to defend himself, but he's one of the ones that said we must believe women. So, Cuomo, is not someone. Andrew Cuomo has been a bully since the 70s and 80s. So this is not something that is a net negative for African Americans. In fact, uh, you know, it probably will pave the way for our first Black woman governor. So, I mean, that's my position on Cuomo. And when you see all of the legislature who have lived under fear of this guy, when they turned on him, Carl Hasty and that crowd, that leaves you to know that people were ready to get rid of this guy, and they saw an opportunity. He was vulnerable, by his own words, believe women, and so therefore he had to go. Politically, it was untenable. And there are a lot of ethical issues about his brother. I did not like what Biden said, that he did a hell of a job, because there are a lot of people in New York that disagree with that. But again, these are political dynasties. These are people who are in bed with each other and have friendships and family friendships. But none of that, even Biden politically had to call for Cuomo's resignation. He was not going to be able to save him. So that's my view from New York. Everyone doesn't share that view, but that's the way I see it.
As somebody that lived there for 10 years, I agree with you. So.
You're muted, Jonathan.
Does this speak to a larger issue of sexual harassment in the workplace? Or do you think that this is just a one-time thing to get rid of someone no one liked? Is this something that forces us to look at, sexual harassment and intimidation differently? Or is it just a tool in this one instance? Just asking for what you think.
Let me say about that, because I hope it isn't. My worst enemy in the world, I don't think that people should be falsely accused of something. And I don't think that we should use this issue in any way. We got to play this issue straight, because it's too important. And it should not matter what party a person is from. If you're accused, I mean, they deserve to be heard. They deserve to defend themselves. That's our system. These are serious allegations. They have serious implications for a person's life, career, reputation. So I hope that this was not just about getting rid of a unpopular person, because if it was, then it has set the movement back. I don't believe it is, because I think Tish James did a thorough investigation and rolled out numerous complaints. But I definitely think it raises, questions and rules. It's a sea change in many ways, because things that had been acceptable in the political arena are increasingly no longer. And so it raises all kinds of implications. But I certainly hope it's not that.
All right. And anyone else want to speak on this before we change the subject?
The whole question of the debacle around elder care and the messing with those numbers and all of that, that's horrible stuff that costs people's lives. So I mean, and see, one of the things that people are talking about, that this dude is resigned to wiggle out being held any more accountable. We talk about that kind of stuff. He needs to be held criminally accountable for that. Criminally accountable, right? Instead of being held up as the darling of the media during the COVID crisis, when you lift up the cover, he was nothing but a monster of corruption that cost people's lives. No, there are criminal dimensions to that, right? And I really hope that folks in their liberalism, don't try and protect him from what that means, because the country is teetering on after coming through so much with this crisis, right? We got all these crazy folks in the South that don't want to get vaccinated and are spreading stuff and whatnot. And we have folks who have their hands on the levers of power and know what the right things are to do and are doing something else for expediency. That is just bad. And it's horrible. So the question of accountability ain't over yet as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to go back to a question that we were talking about earlier when Rakai, the internet went out, and that was about rural communities in Mississippi. You were talking about how rural communities have been ignored and they're facing the same water crisis that was faced in Jackson. The question is, in the infrastructure bill, are they ignored, or in the infrastructure bill, will that also solve for the water issues that they were having in these rural communities?
So I'm not 100% sure how impactful it will be for those rural communities. And I think that's part of the real question that we're trying to figure out, right? Including many of the elected officials in those communities are trying to figure out as well, is how will they receive these funds as having smaller populations and a number of other things. So I don't know. That's the answer.
And actually, does that go back to the original thing that you talked about, which was if the money is given to the state, you really can't know how they're going to spread that money, because often these really like racist, anti-Black state governments will often choke out Black or browner cities or rural areas where we are spread out. Is that a general concern for federal policy and where federal dollars go?
Absolutely, it's a concern, and it's not, and it's a concern for indigenous communities. It's a concern for Black communities, and it's a concern for rural poor communities. I don't want anybody to be mistaken that the state government here cares less about all of those populations, right, than they do about making money for themselves, their pockets. And so one of the things that they push is this idea of very small government, right? Well, the government shouldn't come in and help for certain things. The government shouldn't be responsible for certain things. The government shouldn't do this. And what that does is it creates this idea that, well, if we had a government come in, then we're doing something wrong, right? And so poor communities are suffering. I mean, no medical assistance and buying into the narrative that they shouldn't get it from government, right? And suffering. But I think people are beginning to wake up. What we saw in November of 2020 throughout the state is when we put ballot initiatives, right, resident-led ballot initiatives, citizen-led ballot initiatives onto the ballot for 2020, we saw residents across the state vote in favor for things that would be considered progressive, but were our basic necessities for a better quality of life. We saw folks vote overwhelmingly, over 72% voted to legalize medical marijuana in the state, right? Mississippi grows a good percent of the hemp in this nation, right? We saw, so we have a lot of farmland, right? A lot of our economy comes from farming, and so you saw like people overwhelmingly vote for that across party lines. You saw people vote for the eradication of electoral college laws on the local level, on the municipal level, and on the county level that prevented predominantly Black and brown cities from having Black and brown representation. And so I think when we actually put the decision in the hands of the majority of the people, of the masses of the people, we see some change, and we see the people voting in the right direction. And so we need to be able to include some form of legislation that allows for funding to bypass the state when necessary. It's a must. We've just seen it. We've been saving ourselves for a long time down here in Mississippi. A long time.
And there's a strong tradition of the federal government in times of crisis. People forget this, but the reason why a lot of blacks became Democrats was because of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal. The reason why a lot of blacks became Republicans was because of Abraham Lincoln. So, you know, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, which, I mean, to me, you know, that's one you want to look at that had dubious implications for the African American community. The Great Society was a mixed blessing. But the point is, you know, the government has to, at times, the federal government has to do what's necessary for local communities. I mean, to say that you don't want big government is one thing, but in rural communities where there's no investment, you just can't, the government can ill afford to leave citizens of the United States in dire straits. And so, I hope that, as you say, people are waking up and have a more nuanced analysis and not just drink the Kool-Aid.
I wanted to ask a question. Last week we were talking about the voter legislation that's coming out in different states about voter restrictions, new voter rules, new rules that local rule will be stronger. And now that we have Reverend Tillett in the north and Rakia, you're in the south, can you tell me, as this legislation comes down, are you equally concerned, or do you have any concerns about the new laws that are coming out regarding voters and the local rule that they may have? In one case would be, Jonathan, what's the example you gave last week that the secretary, he could have overturned, like if Georgia wanted to.
You're talking about the local voting laws that are that allow certain Republican legislatures to actually, in effect, determine which ballots are legitimate and which not. That would be Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, among other states. I think Texas passed something very recently as well.
Well, I'll tell you right now in Mississippi, as a direct result of residents overwhelmingly voting for what many would consider progressive ballot initiatives, voting in favor of them, the Supreme Court has now rendered a decision saying that the state legislature, that the ballot initiatives, citizen-led ballot initiatives, may be premature. And so even that they must first, the ballot initiative itself, the language, the need for such initiative must first go before the legislative body before it is placed on the ballot. This is different than what has been in practice for decades, right? In practice, citizens as well as legislators could both petition to have particular initiatives placed on the ballot. And the Secretary of State could approve those initiatives, that language, and it could be placed on the ballot. So right now, we are seeing a great push to reverse that practice at a time when we had numerous voting rights ballot initiatives set to be on our 2022 ballot, including expansion of, or actually the first time where we were going to have a ballot initiative that allowed for early voting. We don't have early voting in Mississippi. We only have absentee voting. It was going to be the first time that citizens were able to actually vote for Medicaid expansion through a ballot initiative process. It was also going to be the first time that citizens had the opportunity to vote using a ballot initiative on whether we should restore rights to people formerly incarcerated. Right now, Mississippi bars people, bars over 200,000 people who are formerly incarcerated from ever voting in their life again, because of 23 felonies are listed that prevent a person from ever voting again in their lives if you're convicted of any one of those 23 felonies. You know, and so we had, it was also going to be the first time where residents could, through a ballot initiative, vote on legislation that would prevent harmful lender practices, predatory lending practices. And so what we see now is an attempt by a Republican-led state government to prevent the people from exercising their power to shift legislation. And so, yes, we're concerned.
In the specific ballots that you're talking about, you're talking like in Mississippi, it seems like poor rural white voters were also supporting those like policies. Are they reacting to their power being taken away, or do they notice?
You know, I think COVID helps people realize what a deep need they had. COVID woke us up in many ways. People were not able to just be independent. They had to depend on each other. And I think that woke people up to the realities of all of the different ways that just standing against a policy or a practice because it appears to be progressive or liberal isn't enough. It isn't enough. It's actually harming their lives. So I do think people began to wake up. I think for whatever reason, COVID, and I think there are many reasons that we know, but COVID really caused people to say, this ain't about party lines. This is about my health. This is about my family's health. This is about our well-being. This is about our ability to actually shift things towards creating a better quality of life for myself and my family.
Muted, Jonathan.
I think we lost Miss Lumumba again
Yes.
in terms of dropping out. But I think that is really interesting in that so much that's talking about small government. And when conservatives are like small government good, one of the things that really COVID did is that it put out the limits of small government, because small government meant people would die, right? Like it's, you know, you wouldn't have a vaccine. You wouldn't have people be able to pay for it. You wouldn't have people being able to pay those medical bills from people who are stuck in COVID or with COVID, right? Like, so in all the ways in which you need big government, you need larger government to actually care about the basic needs of citizens. It really brought a lie to, we can just do it all on our own by ourselves. So,
Reverend
Tiller, we can't hear you.
Oh, you are muted, Reverend Tiller. You are muted. Hold on, let me try to unmute you. You have to unmute yourself on your end, Reverend.
Oh, okay. I'm unmuted now. Okay, if you can hear me. Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, and I would also, in the case of COVID-19, obviously this is a global pandemic, you know, the Great Depression, World War II. But I don't want to be on record. I want to put some distance, at least some distance between the notion that big government is always good, because, you know, we have to be very careful about that. You know, I remember a time when the Republicans argued for local government, states' rights. And I remember when the Democrats argued for government intervention. And then I remember a time when the Democrats argued for local governments and state governments and no intervention from the federal government. So I think it's important that we understand that there are many instances where you do not want big government. You don't want the imposition of the government to impose on the localities of Newark, and you don't want cities imposing educational curriculum I mean, there are a lot of reasons why uh, uh, big government can be problematic, but I think we all can agree that in this instance, it certainly merited a federal response
And
to this global crisis.
And I think that a lot of times we're talking about the difference between redistribution of wealth versus culture war, right? Like things that are about value should be local. Things that are about that where individuals can't really, like you can't really pay for your own medical care, right? Like most people can't do that. Most people can't pay for their own education. Like there are large projects that are social projects, and I think that's really what's being debated when we're talking about big government. I think you would agree with that. Whereas
The
when
public
you're
good, I mean,
talking about
yes, the public
like economic public good, right? Things that
public
will
good,
require redistribution of
but
wealth.
again, I mean, right. But again, it's still a slippery slope because I mean, we know people in our community, even with the issue of COVID. I mean, it's you want to make sure, listen, the government is us, and that's what the citizenry has to always understand. There is no benevolent government above us. There are no people smarter than us. There are no people who care about us. We are the government, and we have elected representatives, and we have to be vigilant. And power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I'm not willing to bequeath uh, my rights, my liberty, what's in my best interest to a government. I want to engage, watch that government, be a part of that process. And I think that's what the citizenry of the United States has to always remember, because, the people in government, they're just people. And if we're not watching them, then that can have, a disastrous effect on us.
Right. And I think what you're talking about is really like small d democracy, right? Like we have to have control over the
Absolutely.
laws that affect our lives. And again, I don't think that's a big government, small government thing. I just think that's a small d democracy thing. That and that's an area where
Yeah.
we always have to fight and agree on and fight for, especially within this climate. We are coming toward the end of this
Yeah,
section.
I agree with that.
So, Reverend Tillard, we'll give you the last word on that. Did anyone have any questions or anything to ask him, or just anything you want to end off on?
Well, I think that one of the things I've got a question about, and too bad Rakia is not still on with us. That Tamika had posted something this week on our website that said, as George Floyd's act chances dim, Biden stays mum on police reform. And I don't think it's a coincidence, right? Clearly, I think
Right.
that Biden had
Right.
put forth what was his interest, right, in terms of
Mhm.
moving the infrastructure bill
Right.
forward.
Right.
And keep in mind, we don't fully know what's in there that's going to benefit the Black community, right? As you
Right.
know, that in most of those bills, they add a lot of pork in it, right? And in order to get the Republicans to go along, there's got to be a whole bunch
Right.
of stuff in their communities that they don't really need, but that in order for them to say that they support it is in there. However, at this particular point, I think that the two things that the Black folks wanted from him, right? And forget we're talking about student loan debt being forgiven and all of that, John. The two things that Black folks met with him about and talked to this man about was the George Floyd and Policing Act and the John Lewis Civil Rights Bill, right? And this man all but gave his promise, according to Tamika, that would be done. Now all of a sudden he's not saying anything about it because he doesn't want to offend his Republican colleagues who totally disagree with seeing this done. What say you, Brother Conrad? I think you muted, brother.
Yeah. Well, listen, I agree with what you said. I mean, I think that's an excellent observation, Ed. That Biden, prides himself and styles himself as this master of the Senate, the rules, the culture, and so it's very important for him to get a big bipartisan victory. And you're absolutely right. That could very well be the thing that he gave up in order to get this this bipartisan effort to where it is now. And I think that, again, that's why I think we always have to be clear-headed and realize what politics is. It's horse trading, it's people negotiating, getting what they need. So, I think that we have to be, as we said already, vigilant, because even when you think politicians are doing something in your interest, really they're doing it in their own interest. Right. And that's okay. That's okay. But it's just when we go goo goo gaga over these people is when I think we make the great mistake. I mean, trust but verify. I mean, that's right. Our obligation. So that's a very salient observation, Ed. And that could very well be. Incidentally, I love that sweatshirt. Is that Jesse Jackson 84?
88.
Okay.
88.
I wasn't down in 88, but
I was with him for both,
84.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I rocked with him. I got the 84 too, brother.
Okay. You know All right. I love it.
I gotta keep that in the box.
I see that throwback. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I gotta find out where you got that. We gotta talk about that.
I'll tell you where. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. So, I always appreciate being here. I love you all.
Reverend Conrad, bring your governor. How do you pronounce her name? Bring your governor with you next time. Governor.
Okay,
how do you pronounce her name?
I might wait for Tish James. I don't even know.
Okay, all right.
Bring the mayor. Bring the mayor.
Hey, Conrad,
we'll definitely get Eric on. We'll get Eric on. We definitely will do that, okay.
But Brother Conrad, you joking? I just heard on the QT that Reverend Sharpton is contemplating running for governor.
Yeah.
Well, talk about
he said what I heard.
Listen, Donna, you heard what I said. That would be interesting.
yes, I know that. I can hear how you're kind of couching that right now.
Yeah. He said that some of the Democrats in Albany are asking him to run. Now we have to. Okay.
And
all right, Reverend Conrad.
When Conrad comes back, when Reverend. And
look, he got out of here quick. He got out of here
jumped out too. I don't think he wanted to comment on that too much. I think he has some opinions on that.
Here you go.
But we are okay. Yeah, he's backstage, but we are. Yeah. But he's out. All right, so we'll have him back. I know he'll have a lot about that for the next time.
Yes.
But we have our 8:00 guest on, the brilliant historian, artist. Noelle Lorraine Williams. We're going to give you a wonderful introduction, an introduction that you deserve based on the caliber and quality of work that you've done. And that can only be done by Zaid Muhammad. So, Zaid, can you give her the introduction that she so readily deserves right now? Because she needs an introduction. I'm really fascinated by the topic. I'm like, wow, Black Power in the 19th century? Really? Well, I look forward to the discussion, but Zaid.
Well, let's do it this way. I mean, we just had a retiring elder educator in Marcia Brown from Rutgers-Newark come on, and we have now, I would dare say, an emerging star in that same environment for doing some important work that's been waiting. That's been sitting there like archives are always there, waiting to be uplifted, uplifting some important things that are very important to appreciate in these times. When she was with us last, you remember, she was with us last, we were uplifting Frederick Douglass in this area, and the renaming of the park after Frederick Douglass, right? 19th century abolitionism, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're here again, right? Now we're lifting up the voices of some incredible women, right? Fighting against slavery, fighting for the vote, and fighting for just the basic tenets of what some folks, I don't know how you can take it for granted in this place called America, called democracy, right? So we're glad to have with us again Noelle Lorraine Williams, 19th century Black Power exhibit at the library, and the fact that this is happening, in this crazy transitional space that we're in too called COVID is also an important accomplishment. So what we want to say, welcome back to our dear sister scholar, right? And let her take us down this walk back to the corridors of the 19th century and as to what that and how that instructs us in appreciating what has come this way that we're more familiar with. Noelle, welcome back, dear Queen. How you doing?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me here. I really appreciate it. What I'll do is actually start off. I actually want to make sure that folks get a copy of our historic sites map. It's at the Newark Public Library where the exhibition is on the second floor. The exhibition is actually a 2-gallery exhibition. So it's on the second floor and it's in the James Brown African American Room. If you pick up this historic sites map and you come visit the exhibition, you can also see all these locations around Newark. Including a site that's related to Baba Zaid, which is the monument for the folks who were murdered during the 1967 rebellion. And, sometimes I call the 1967 rebellion the 1967 massacre because we tend to forget that Newark was actually occupied by the police and by the military. Which is a significant way to think about the history of Newark and what we do in Black Power 19th century. Because one of the themes that underlies the exhibition is looking at the ways that African Americans have basically been fighting in Newark for their democracy and for the right to stay here since the early 1800s. Even before around 1804, we see documents. When you visit the exhibition at Newark Public Library, it's at 5 Washington Street, downtown Newark. Please check the hours on npl.org or on the website. You'll see how African Americans here have fought colonization and how Newark in New Jersey was the home of the colonization, American Colonization Society, which, if you're not familiar with it, was a coalition of anti-slavery whites and white slaveholders to send African Americans to Liberia. So basically, they were witnessing the activism that free Blacks were doing everywhere, namely Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Newark in the South. And they were like, we have to get rid of these free Black people. And so one of their solutions was Liberia. Now, the biggest problem with the colonization movement is that they didn't involve African Americans there. African Americans weren't allowed to come to meetings. African Americans weren't allowed to participate. So people like Theodore Frelinghuysen, which actually one of our major streets here in Newark is named after, he felt that African Americans were depressed people who really, if it was possible to send them to Africa, we should, and if not, just put them in a state or a place by their own, where they're all by their own. And what I think is that this and the push for colonization is a part of the whole push towards the deepening segregation with African Americans. We even see in the exhibition how in 1930 in Newark, one of the solutions to African Americans who could not find work here, who were coming from the South, was to send them back to the South. And literally, they tried to join with organizations like the Urban League to return African Americans to places like Georgia and Alabama. And people literally had to argue, African Americans are not citizens of one state. We're citizens of the country. So what we see is that Black Newark has been on the forefront of the push against removal, segregation, colonization, and the right to be citizens in this country. And so that's one of the things that the exhibition touches upon.
Wow. like you said a lot, and you were saying that, like, because that Freelandheisen was like, you need to go back to the South, go back to Africa, or do whatever, and that
get the hell out of here.
Right, and that.
And I guess the irony is that we had Vice Chancellor on at the beginning, and now we have Noelle here with us. And in both cases, Vice Chancellor and Noelle said, in all of this planning, we were never at the table. You know, and the cases are in 2021, there's a lot of planning that may be going on today where we're still not at the table. So that's something that's a very thoughtful and it's something to think about, and how important and as voting and all of that comes up, and how it's almost like now don't even participate because we haven't been at the table, and why should we participate? I'm sorry, Jonathan.
And that geographic exclusion, right? Like, you need to be excluded from a place, and we need to plan without you to exclude you geographically someplace, right? Was this the beginning of how to do this more insidiously, like redlining and all of the ways that they walled Black people off?
Yeah, I mean, with this exhibition, I don't go too deeply into redlining because, as we know, Newark is a special example. I would have to use actually the whole state of New Jersey to do examples of redlining. But I just want to be clear, Freelandheisen did not, during the 1830s and 1840s when he lived, he wasn't advocating for Blacks to go back to the South. He was advocating for Blacks to go to Liberia. You know, he really felt that this was an important part of the exhibition, understanding these white men, right, who are depicted in history as being benevolent, anti-slavery folks. They were anti-slavery, but they hated Black people. So we see Freelandheisen giving money to one of the second Black churches, but they're giving the money to the second Black churches because they're supporting early segregation, right? Exactly. First Presbyterian Church on Broad Street here in Newark, you know, African Americans left there in 1834 because they were required to stand during services, even though they paid for membership. As I continued to do my research, I saw that this happened all across the Mid-Atlantic, all across the country. And as you guys know, in Philadelphia, that's how the African Methodist Episcopal Church starts, because Richard Allen, they reject what was called then the nigger pew or the African corner or the African pew. And so Newark just has so many amazing examples, as you'll see in the exhibition. Even in 1866, and the sister brought up voting, we see someone like Charles Thompson, who was the leader at one of the Black churches, who they start a test suit. They walk into a voting site here in Newark, and even though they're not allowed to vote because Black men lost a vote in New Jersey I think it was in 1808, because when the New Jersey Constitution was first established, African Americans and women who met the property requirement or the wealth requirement could vote into the early 1810s. And so, but then it was rescinded. So then by 1866, people like Charles Thompson and Anthony Mandeville, they come up with a test suit with a brother, Abraham Conover, in Delaware. And what they're trying to do is overturn the New Jersey Constitution so that Black men will be allowed to vote. So that started here in 1866. That was a test suit. They lost the test suit, but we can see this African American community here in Newark, men, women who are buying properties basically near Rutgers campus, other parts of Newark in the Ironbound. And it's amazing because it really upsets notions of how we think about African Americans and in our push and our activism and our work for democracy here in this city, here in this country, and in the whole entire world. And it has
let me lift somebody up to who we love, who I know who I love, right? All right, 'cause you just kind of, you know, glossed over, the length of the legacy and
Mhm.
whatnot. And you mentioned our presence in the Ironbound. One of the folks who are a part of this exhibit on a creative lens has, is a child of an old Newark family, right?
Yes.
Won't you lift up for a minute Adrian Wheeler, right? A
Yes.
powerful Newark artist, right? And a dear personal friend and inspiration as a creative and as a comrade, right? And her family legacy in Newark. 'Cause a lot of folks don't realize that we've been in Newark for a long time. It didn't just
Yes.
we weren't the black rush that came out of the South. We've been here for a while.
Yeah, I mean, and the best evidence of that is if we go to NJ Pack and you look at the arch near where people are dancing every Thursday night, our brothers and sisters, that's a marker for 50 Black people who were buried underneath
That's
their
right.
feet where people are dancing, which is fine because we have a 200-year legacy of making communities and cemeteries and respecting our ancestors. So it's kind of interesting that we're doing that in a way that we don't even know. Or you can go even to the Newark Museum where they have a well in the backyard that was carved by African Americans in the 1760s, enslaved African Americans who lived near where the Star Ledger building is now, who carved that well, and it's still in the back of the Newark Museum. And if you pick up this map at the library, you can see these various sites. But yes, I have to give a shout out to Adrian. And before I do that, a big shout out to the Vice Chancellor who supported this work as well with the Frederick Douglass Field. We worked on that project together. And a major goal of that project was to demonstrate African Americans who sustained Newark during this period. Adrian is an amazing example in the show of the families that have lived here, African American families that have lived here for more than 200 years.
Wow.
And even and we have a video piece from Adrian where she depicts herself walking the streets, looking for the different addresses where her family lived. We see, and she has done a beautiful, if you guys stop by, it's at the James Brown African American Room gallery section. She has actually made these beautiful prints of the various documents that depict her family's existence in Newark, marriage certificates, census information, things like that. One of the things I wanted to do with this exhibition is to definitely incorporate art and culture, because that's what our people do. Culture is a part of learning and education and history. So we have actually, if you visit the website, blackpower19th-century.com, you'll see 2 videos that depict an enslaved woman. And these are all true stories. Enslaved woman who ran away from her enslaver in Orange and was captured here in Newark and kept in the jail with her 2-year-old in the site that's now the Grace Church on Broad Street that's near the Federal Building. You learn stories like that, or you learn stories about Reverend Payson, who was a spoken word poet, as we know it now, in the 1850s, reciting a poem for his friend who was an Underground Railroad leader. Thank you, Baba. And so this is just an amazing opportunity.
I didn't put that up. I don't even know how to put that up. You gotta thank Mike and Jonathan for that.
Thank you for bringing up the site. So because of COVID, I had planned to do a virtual exhibition for this project. Because of COVID, it's a little bit more of a dense virtual exhibition. But we have the website that people can visit. The virtual exhibition, if you click on it, and then if you click down here, you'll see actually all of the written text in the exhibition. We have 8 panels of new and interesting history, academic scholarship about Newark. And at the library, there are 13 display boxes. In this image right here, these are all people who are connected to Newark. If you scroll down, you see some of the headings there. But this sister, we don't know her name, the sister at the top, but she took her picture here on Broad and Market Street in the late 1870s. These sisters over here around her are women who were a part of the Black Arts Movement in the 1960s and 70s. This is Samuel Ward, one of the best known national
abolitionists.
activists.
Yeah, great abolitionist.
Yes,
That's right.
abolitionist connected with the Jerry's Rescue, who was a teacher right here in what we now call University Avenue, but it was then called Plain Street, right at this church. And one of the reasons why I connect this to the 1960s is because we did a lot of the things, they did a lot of the things that we connect to the 1960s Black Power movement. They established schools in places like this church in the basement, which is what Amina Baraka did with the African Free School.
Free School, that's right.
Which is actually named after the 19th century African Free School in Uptown New York. You know, there were colored conventions during this period, which relate to the 1960s colored conventions that took place for more than 80 years with African Americans, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, New York, Delaware, meeting up with each other, talking about things like even the quote unquote nigger pew in the African corner. Frederick Douglass, who came to this church, he actually went back and forth on that topic because he, at one point, he said maybe we should stay in the churches and fight. But then later on, he was like, forget it. Let's leave these churches. Right. So, I mean, it's just, and then of course, the well from the Newark Museum. And so basically the exhibition, the virtual exhibition and the in-house exhibition take you out walking through this history. I actually bring you up to the 1920s because what I want folks to see is that there were people like Black abolitionists, like the Ray family. Adam Ray, he was an activist in New York with the African Free School that Amina Baraka named her school after. He lived here in Newark. His son was someone who worked for the Underground Railroad. He was Adam Ray Jr. They lived near Academy Street. You know, his daughter, Rose Morrick, was one of the first teachers here in Newark. She helped establish St. Barnabas. She gave money to St. Barnabas. She also helped start the Urban League. You know, they started circles with the Urban League. People like Matthew Henson were coming here to speak. You know, later on, James Weldon Johnson, Du Bois. In the exhibition, we have a picture of W.E.B. Du Bois and Jesse Fawcett, James Weldon Johnson at the Armory up the hill. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, what I want people to see is that the sons and daughters of these Black abolitionists then became the people who were able to try to lead Newark's African American community in the 1920s. And then we also see people like Brenda Morrick, who was the daughter of Rose Morrick, who then becomes a part of the Harlem Renaissance. She wins 2 awards with the Crisis in Harlem. You know, she works at Bordentown. Some of y'all are familiar with that, right, in South Jersey. Right. At the Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C. So what's key is that this is a local story, but it's national and international in scope.
And you say international in scope. Can you expound on that?
Sure. I mean, many of the things that we don't speak about it that much in the exhibition, but the 2 central themes that we talk about as far as the international perspective is with the American Colonization Society and their need to have free African Americans move to West Africa. But then we have something that's called that I call Black emigration. So you have these African Americans, like the aforementioned Reverend Payson Rogers, who, if you guys go to the video section, you'll see Newark poet Khalid Raymond reciting one of his poems. Yes. One of his lifelong dreams, since he lived in Connecticut and moved here, was to go to Africa and be a missionary to Africans. And this was hard for me to wrestle with in the exhibition, because you have these white folks trying to send us there. Then you have these African Americans who want to go to Africa to, quote, save the souls of African Americans, right? He does move to West Africa and he dies 45 days later. And so in that way, and then of course, people like I mentioned already, Samuel Ringgold Ward, who lives here, and then he moves to Canada, and he eventually ends up in Jamaica. So we get to see these various conversations. There's even a group of people who are part of the church who go to Trinidad to leave the country here, and they lose about 5 people. They end up coming back here to University Place or Plain Street, and they're like, no, this colonization plan or any kind of immigration plan is not what we need. We need to stay here.
And it's interesting how you're saying that these struggles and fights kind of reflect things that are going on now, because there's now a movement for Black people to move to Ghana, Nigeria, to leave the United States, right? To go to Costa Rica, right? Like, there are a lot of young Black people who are thinking America's a violent place for Black people. We don't really need to be here anymore. And I think the power of the exhibition is that these are the same questions, these are the same debates.
Yes. We've been having these same debates. I mean, the way the colored convention movement actually starts, right, is they're bringing everybody together. I can't remember his name now. I think it's James Fortin. I'm not sure.
You got it.
He's a ship maker. And he owns a business. He's actually kind of the first one who comes up with this idea, and then the whites kind of run with it after Fortin passes away, and they develop their own spin on it. But in Philadelphia, they were
co-opting ideas back then too, transforming them into a white oppressive version of liberation strategy.
Been stealing the whole time,
So they were doing that back then. Black person's like, hey, here's an idea to liberate Black people. White people jump on it, pervert it, and push it to their own meaning. Interesting.
Exactly.
The whole time.
And 2,000 Black Philadelphians came to that meeting, and they said, no, we are not leaving this place, because there were many sites, right? You guys know Canada, and folks moved. A lot of freedom seekers moved to Canada. We have sites like Nova Scotia, where the British sent many of the African Americans who were a part of the Revolutionary War, and other sites. Even think of Sierra Leone, places like that.
It's very important to folks, our folks moving back.
Yeah.
Back to the Great Fall Coffee and so forth.
Yeah. And so it's powerful here in Newark. I mean, one of the folks we have hanging in the corridor is Samuel Cornish, who's one of the co-founders of the first African-American newspaper. He lives here in downtown Newark. He was a pastor on University Place on Frederick Douglass Field, but we see the complexity in Samuel Cornish's story, because his son, and Samuel Cornish actually wrote, and we have this in the exhibition, but I'm actually going to link it on the website too. He writes a 35-page letter to Theodore Frelinghuysen, breaking it down to him why their movement is racist. So this is a man he had to pass on an everyday basis on the streets, who's seen as one of the most benevolent philanthropists in this city, this country. I mean, he, at some point, I think Frelinghuysen was the president at what would become NYU and Rutgers. I mean, so many things. And Samuel Cornish, lives here, and he's like writing letters to Frelinghuysen, breaking it down to them. He's telling them, look at what you did in Dominica. You know what I'm saying? Like, look at what the evidence of what you all trying to help us, your Christian goals. Look at where it's left us. And this he's doing in 1836.
Wow. and again, like years ago, I interviewed talk show host Gary Bird, and he, like, this was like over 20 years ago, right? Like, and one of the things that he said that that actually inspired me for years is that he said, we have the playbook. I asked him, why do you like continue to fight and struggle when we always have to repeat ourselves? Like it almost seems like we'll never win. And he says one thing that we have that we never had before is that we have a playbook, and we have the history of what works, what didn't work, what people were fighting for. Is like what we just need to understand what that playbook is. But we have all of these playbooks from the past. So that what you're saying is like very much appreciated. It's like, wow, like all of these different struggles had different names, but these were the same concepts that people were fighting for. How do you deal with that? Like, how do you, like, when you're looking and finding this out, how do you react to it? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it like we're fighting the same things?
I go through a range of emotions. Like when I found that 1930s article talking about deporting African Americans back to the South, I'm just like, wow, you know, they've been up to this for a long time, ever since African American. And then, you know, I find a document in 1804 where they're like, we can't allow them to spend time downtown past 8 o'clock. We can't let free blacks and enslaved blacks commingle as early as 1804. You
in
know,
Jersey, we ain't talking about Mississippi. We talking about right here.
You know,
Right.
we can't allow them to sell things that they shouldn't be selling. I mean, it's just amazing. But then the things that bring me back to the story that make it so important is that I find stories like Jenny and Flora, who in 1808, Jenny's trying to buy the freedom of Flora. But then this white man, you know, tries to dupe her because she doesn't know how to read. Right? So he gives her a promissory note. It says something else. She's thinking she's going to pay him off 50 pounds for this woman, Flora. I don't know who Flora is because I don't know from the archive. You know, this is something I found in Philadelphia that tells me what's going on at First Presbyterian Church here on Broad Street in Newark. But that inspires me. A sister who couldn't even read, trying to buy the freedom of somebody else. I mean, but it's just, but what that said to me is this is the reason why education was important. It wasn't just like, oh, let's educate ourselves to edify our lives. It's let's educate ourselves so we can live, you know. And you know, I'll say this in closing. I mean, one of the things that was so deeply moving to me reading all these documents, and you'll see in the exhibition, I have a quote from the Colored Anti-Slavery Society, where they say if all the founders of this country were to take the blood that they've spilled of us and put it, they could literally swim in it, you know? And how the blood, they always discuss the blood because this, like, and thank you to Vice Chancellor for mentioning Dr. Melissa Cooper today, because like she said to me, Noelle, you know, I don't know necessarily if I want to call them Black abolitionists because it's just freeing our people, right? And so one of the things in the text for me is that over and over again, they talk about the blood. And I'm like, it's about the blood, you know, it's about the life force. It's about death. It's about rape. It's about all of these things, and how these folks still in these churches came together to raise money for the Underground Railroad, try to save poor people, the middle class Black people. Samuel Cornish writes in one newspaper article, he's like, I've spent all my money to save this church. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I just encourage people to come by the exhibition. You know, please check out the link. We have a children's guide. We have a teen guide that you can pick up in the children's room. We've even created a 3D replica of these shackles these 18th century shackles that were found in Morris County at the Beverick plantation. We did a 3D copy so that, you know, the youth and other people can see, like, New Jersey was not this benign place.
It never was, never, still not.
But
we are observing the centennial of the birth of racial profiling this year in New Jersey, by the way. But go ahead. I get kind of wound up. Well, Linda, my sister Linda Gartrell, the Pink Dragon lady, is giving you some big shout outs and whatnot, because Linda's one of our stellar entrepreneurs and whatnot. So she definitely is feeling you, as everybody else is as well. And we just had Linda on a few weeks ago, and I definitely need y'all to connect, because Linda, I hope you're hearing me. Noelle is also a brilliant artist.
Oh, I've known Linda for years.
That's right.
Yeah,
Well,
I met Linda when she was working with Jerry, almost like back in my early 30s.
Yes. Magnet, that was the Gatalistic one, the late great Jerry Gant. Yes.
Yes. So I've known.
And she hears you. She hears both you and Saeed. So she hears you.
But definitely come by. And we have guiding questions in the children's room. So for teens or adults, you know, and you can pick up the replica, but it'll help you guide through it, because the exhibition is pretty dense. And yes, Linda.
You see Linda, right? Go back like car seats. Right on, baby.
And the library wants me to invite you all to their reception for the exhibition, which is next Wednesday. And we'll actually have just some brief remarks from like the Newark NAACP, which the Newark NAACP was co-founded by Grace Baxter Fenderson, who was James Baxter's
Baxter Terrace. There you go.
Yes, James Baxter's daughter, and James Baxter was the first Black principal here, who helped usher in the first Black. She was actually Black and Native American student that integrated the high school. So join us for the reception, and then to close out the show on the 25th and on the 1st, the last 2 Wednesdays, I'll be giving gallery tours. If you want to hear me go off in person, that's your opportunity. But I'm bringing lollipops.
And Noelle, I see as we get ready to wind down and close, we have our DJ here. He's going to ask you a question, but I see Chairman of Pop came on and Larry said outstanding. So I don't know, Zaid, has she had an opportunity to present before Pop?
No, not yet.
Okay,
not
so
yet.
Noelle, I'm going to ask Zaid to reach out to you about that. But Rhino, what's that all important question?
And we have, I just want to point out, I don't know if you could see it, and we have that on the map. We have a copy of the place on the map where the memorial is.
Yes.
So as well as the Kinney Church.
Yes.
Okay.
We got to lift that up and really take that space to another level too.
Yes.
We've been talking about it should be renamed, you know, Rebellion Memorial Park, and that place be uplifted and really, you know, redone in a full way as a park to honor those who we lost in the Newark Rebellion. I want to remind you also too, 19th century, I do Frederick Douglass's "What to the Slave is Your 4th of July" as a monologue. So if you come back to the 19th century, I want to jump in that on the spoken word piece.
But if you can get with Noelle behind the scenes
down, Kelly,
but
we down.
Good stuff. So Rhino, can you ask the question? Rhino, DJ.
Peace, Queen Noelle. How are you?
What's up? How you feeling?
All right, I'm well. So you know, we like to ask our guests, especially when
she's not the first time she's with us.
I know.
Okay. All right, so you've been asked this question before, then, right?
Yeah.
Who's your favorite hip hop artist or group, or who are you listening to like right now that's got you? You know, it could be somebody from back in the day. It doesn't have to be today's artist, because I know a lot of our folks ain't really listening to today's artists like that. But I mean, whoever in hip hop stands out for you that always touched you personally.
Yeah, I think the last hip hop artist I listened to was probably what's his name, Toby Angel, Wake.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I listen to him because I really love the art and style. But I have to say, the dopest hip hop song for me over the past year was the only good remix ever, and that was for "Fight the Power." And the sister from Detroit, she does a verse on it, and that verse just blows me out every time. So if y'all haven't heard the remix to "Fight the Power," they did it during Black Lives Matter, everything.
Yeah. That's the one with Nas on it, right?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And the dude
I think
from the
Rhapsody's
yes. And that sister, she just like, she rips it. It just reminded me of like Diggable Planets and everything. But please listen to it, everybody, if you get the chance.
Yeah.
And it'll be on
Public Enemy is my favorite.
the reception next Wednesday.
Okay.
Awesome. Great share, great stuff. I'll be there Wednesday. I figure out the tour. I bring my 17-year-old to the tour because she definitely needs your energy and your wisdom, and your insight and your contribution, right? And we'll have it on blast for sure. So it's good to have you back, right?
Yes.
We appreciate the depth and the commitment of what you're doing, right? And it's another important reemergent Newark story that looks like us.
Yes.
So thank you so very much. And we're gonna have to get you back on again as well.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And just thank you for supporting. I appreciate it. You had me on for the Frederick Douglass Field. Hopefully we're gonna have that marker up this year. We're close to it. And then now for the exhibition. So I look forward to seeing you, and be blessed.
All right. Yes, you too. All right. So thank you again.
Okay.
Good stuff.
That is All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. We are going into the DJ Rhino's State of Hip Hop segment. That last segment was great. Shout out again to one of my former debaters, Dr. Melissa Cooper. And I always brag on her as much as possible. She was the first nationally competitive debater I ever coached. Met her my first day teaching. Amazing, brilliant intellectual. Has been a brilliant intellectual since the day I met her. So that was always good. So DJ Rhino, what's up?
Peace. What's good? How y'all doing?
We're
DJ
good.
Rhino gave us homework. Y'all ready? Go ahead.
Where's Mr. Randall?
He sent out like, this is what we're talking about. Be ready. Go ahead.
I did.
Oh no, that was Chris.
That was Chris Randall. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was Chris.
He's not here. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna talk about him. We can talk about him. All right.
Sounds like a dog.
He just brought out about the Nas. I thought that was you, right? About the Nas
that was Chris.
record. And then I reposted all of Lauren's her lyrics, because you were saying her lyrics. So I went back as soon as we got off the radio last week and read the lyrics. And the lyrics have been getting quite a stir on the media. Everybody's been talking about Lauren's lyrics.
I saw your post, Donna, and then I reposted it because it needs to be said, it needs to be read. She went in and spoke her piece, but all of it was true. You know what I mean? I don't think any of it was fabricated. Then, she was just speaking her piece, speaking her mind from, her perspective. And I appreciated that, man. We haven't heard Lauryn Hill actually like spit rhymes in a long time.
Right.
So it was good to hear her and good to hear her flow again and just all of that, man. It just felt good to hear, But that was dope. So, and it's that one song really is the song that's got King's Disease 2 like just going, man. That one song's got it burning. I mean, he's got other great songs on there. But that one, Nobody, featuring Lauryn Hill, is the one that's really been pushing it hard. And it's crazy the impact that it's made. And speaking of impact, something else that's blown up, Jadakiss from the the whole Locks Dipset versus. I mean, Jadakiss has gotten all kinds of deals. His sales and stuff and everything has gone up like 200%. Like,
he got keys to the cities. Mayor gave him keys to the city.
The freestyle, the Who Shot Your freestyle that he did on the verses was actually an old freestyle he did back in 2010 on the mixtape for Top 5 Dead or Alive with Green Lantern. And now Def Jam is talking about putting that freestyle out now as a single.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like they're actually working that out. So they're putting out a freestyle that he did in 2010. They're putting it out now because of him performing that freestyle in the verses. Because that was the moment in verses where he basically finished Dipset. You know.
Now, are the Locks getting any credit? I mean, is it just Jadakiss?
No, they all get credit because they move as a unit and they basically held him down. You know, I saw another interview with them where they were talking about how, you know, some days Sheek Louch might be the one that's killing it, and they got to just kind of step back and make sure they just hold him down with the ad libs or whatever else. You know what I mean? Same thing if Styles P is killing it for the night. You know what I'm saying? So it just happened to be that, you know, Jada was killing it for that night, and you know they held him up. You know, but the Locks as a unit is getting the love. But of course, Jada as a solo artist as well is getting a whole lot of shine. He's getting a whole lot of shine, and blessings to him, man. Because you know,
and in the comments during the verses, somebody said, "I like how Jadakiss is moving, talking about they juicing and they praying while Dipset," and then they said da 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 da, but they was like Jada praying and juicing right now. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, Fat Joe, he was hilarious on his podcast. He was talking about it, and he was talking about. He said, you know, Styles is juicing. He said Jadakiss wasn't drunk. He was focused. He said Sheek Louch was cock diesel. You know, and he was like, yo, these dudes are Jedis, you know, and he was just, he was going in, man. But yeah, salute to the Locks, man. The Locks, like I said last week, they holding it down for New York. They holding it down for Yonkers. They holding it down for Big E and DMX. You know what I mean? You know, they doing their thing, man, and they deserve it. So big ups to them. I want to say happy the 13th to y'all. Got my 13 shirt on. If y'all don't know about 13, y'all know who Pharoah Monch is from Organized Confusion. Pharoah Monch has a band. He got together with a couple of brothers and put together a band called 13. Now it's spelled TH1RT3EN. 13. And it's kind of like a, you know, it's like a rock. It's like a rock band, and they get into some heavy stuff. But in Pharoah Monch, in Pharoah Monch fashion, you know, he still gets into real deep content. You know, even like the whole subject of the number 13, he tries to flip the script on your, you know, all of the superstitions of the number and all of that kind of stuff. You know, he really gets into it and flips the script on all of that stuff, man. And it's a dark sounding album. That the name of the album is A Magnificent Day for an Exorcism. And it's a dark sounding album with a positive message. You know what I'm saying? So it's something deep to get into. Like I said, it's like, you know, some black rock. You know what I mean? So it's heavy, man. It's deep and it's dope. And I just thought yeah, there you go. Yep, that's Pharoah right there. That was the live. I think the Tiny Desk that they did. Yeah, and it's pretty dope. So anybody that gets a chance to see that, definitely check it out. But it's really dope, man. Pharoah he's one of my top 5s as far as MCs. Pharoah is crazy. So salute to him. That's why I got on the 13, you know, Friday the 13th. You know, I was trying to flip the script on the number myself. You know, I was telling people, I was like, forget watching Jason and Friday the 13th. Why don't you go watch that Netflix joint, the 13th, which is talking about the 13th Amendment and, you know, the prison system and all of that. Get into that. You know what I'm saying? And then I was saying, if you want something to listen to, get into Pharoah and his band. You know what I mean? Just flipping the script, man, and doing something positive, doing something constructive. You know what I'm saying? Instead of always trying to put, you know, a dark narrative on something. You know what I mean?
So instead of talking about Friday the 13th, we should be reminded of the 13th Amendment or something like that. That's cool.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Let's just be more constructive with these things, because really what happens is, you know, we were the people that created all of all things. We created all symbols, all faiths, all of this stuff. This was us. And you know, what happens is you have other people who take these things, take these symbols and these rituals, and they turn it around for their own purposes. And those purposes are not always good. You know what I mean? Not always positive. And so, we got to turn those things around and take them back. We got to take those symbols back, take those rituals back and use them for what they were for when we had them. You know what I mean? So, that's what I'm about with this shirt right here. But tomorrow, what I was going to wear today was my De La Soul shirt. I'm going to wear that tomorrow on the set when I do my shake up set on twitch.tv. De La Soul. De La Soul, congratulations to De La Soul, man. They had a long battle.
Getting their masters, yeah.
Masters, man, from Tommy Boy Records. In the beginning, I'm guessing maybe the deal in the beginning was that their masters were going to be owned by Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers were the ones who owned their masters in the very beginning. And then at, I believe it was in 2017, Tommy Boy Records got a hold of those masters, so I guess they bought them off of Warner or whatever. But when Tommy Boy had hold of the masters, when they were doing the streaming and stuff, De La Soul was only getting like 10% of the streaming, while everything else went to Tommy Boy. And we already know that the streaming is like percentages off of a penny and all of that. So they weren't getting anything. You know what I mean? So then that's when they went into, they had this big campaign, this big boycott of Tommy Boy Records. And they were telling all of their fans and the public not to stream any of their own music. They're like, don't stream my music. Like, it was the same thing Dave Chappelle went through when he was saying, don't watch the Chappelle show on Comedy Central. And, same thing Anita Baker's going
Anita's doing now, right? Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's that kind of a thing. So, De La Soul was going through that. They were begging the public, do not, purchase anything De La Soul, for this period of time. So what happened now is that a media company named Reservoir Media, it's a music company actually called Reservoir Media. They bought the masters off of. They basically bought out Tommy Boy Records for $100 million. They bought out Tommy Boy. Yeah. And they got hold of all of De La's work and all of that, and so now, they're going to start putting out their music, streaming their music out to the public and stuff like that. So now we can go out there, if you want to buy their music, you want to stream any of it, whatever, we can do that, and De La Soul will get their proceeds. I'm still waiting to hear what the percentages are going to be with all of that, because that's still what's going to determine how much they get. But it just seems like right now they're in a better place, with their music and having that relationship with the public, because you want to have that relationship with the public and you still want to get paid and take care of your business, you know what I mean? And get paid for your work and your art and craft that what you put your heart and soul in for all these years, you know what I mean? So congratulations to De La Soul for that. And again, tomorrow on my show, The Shake Up, on twitch.tv/Rhino CMZ at 3 p.m. I'll be there doing a De La Soul tribute at 3 o'clock. So check that out also. What else is popping off? Oh, Wednesday, August 11th. That just
What's going on Wednesday, August 11th?
This past Wednesday was hip hop's birthday.
Ah,
yeah, the very first party that Kool Herc.
Yes.
1520 Sedgwick Ave.
Now you got to tell us more about that. Like, why is that considered hip hop's birthday?
Because basically, that's what I said. That was the very first party that Kool Herc threw at the recreation center at his building, 1520 Sedgwick Ave. That was where everything started. That's where he first tried his merry-go-round technique, which was basically running different breaks back and forth. And at this time, this is This is before there was any scratching because Theodore hadn't gotten to that point yet. Flash hadn't gotten to the point where you can cue it on beat and do anything. So this was just going back and forth on the turntable, dropping the needle, because there was no spin back at that time, because spinning back was mainly, that was a Flash thing in hip hop. But the technique was called merry-go-round. I could throw on the break beat to Apache, and then throw on the break beat to Give It Up, Turn It Loose by James Brown, and just go back and forth and do that, that kind of thing. So that was his first time doing that technique. That was the first party that, things really went down like that. His MC, Coke LaRock, that was his MC back in the day when they were doing parties. So big up to Coke. But yeah, so that's why it's considered hip hop's birth.
Now, has Kool Herc ever been financially rewarded for pioneering hip hop? Like, has there ever been a time where it's like he got actually, we all talk about giving people credit for what they've done. Has he ever benefited financially for the stuff that he's done?
Well, I mean, from who other than artists who came out of their pocket just to show him that love? I mean, it's not like hip hop has a union or anything. There's no, what organization is there to handle something like that? You know what I mean? Which is something that a lot of hip hop artists are trying to work on now. I know Jay-Z's trying to work on that. I know Nori's trying to work on that. There's a lot of brothers and sisters that in hip hop that are trying to work on creating some type of a union for the culture of hip hop, so that artists can get paid, and if an artist dies, their family will be taken care of, and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
And the whole thing, this thing, like the whole thing with De La with their masters and things like that, you know what I mean? So, there's talk going on about trying to create something like that. But right now we don't have anything like that. Right now it's about, different groups and different organizations within the culture that feel like, oh, Kool Herc, man, he deserves this. He started this, so let's, so I'm sure he's gotten paid like that. But as far as like, just it hasn't happened like that.
Noelle,
In case you miss it, Noelle,
that her sister paid for that first party.
And I think it sounds it's more appropriate coming from me, a little feminine history, that while Kool Herc gave a party, his sister paid for it. Okay,
that's right.
Continue, sir.
That's how it works. That's how it works. We all in it. We all
That's
in.
right.
We all in.
But
So,
Rhino, I want to come back and talk a little bit more, and maybe we can have Ed. It was actually in the industry, but maybe we can talk a little bit more about those masters, because after a certain time, you're supposed to get your masters back, but it's not a given. You got to ask for it and go through all of these theatrics. So we should talk about that.
Right, and we do have 3 minutes left in the show, and as we're wrapping it up, that might be a good way to close it out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, damn, I lost the other point I was gonna say, but I do want to say happy birthday to Said G from Ultramagnetic. He's one of the brothers that I met, one of the legends that I met at that Sha Rock event that I went to in the Bronx during the summer. It's his born day today, so big ups to Said G. Also, happy birthday to Chill Will, who was one of the DJs, because Dougie Fresh had 2 DJs, and Chill Will was one of them. Happy birthday to Chill Will. Also, happy birthday to the Intelligent Hoodlum, who we know also as Tragedy or Tragedy Gaddafi. Happy born to him as well. And that's all I got. But yeah, Donna, what you were saying as far as the contracts and stuff like that, yeah, we need to figure that out, find out what the stipulations are, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. And is there anything else that Donna or Zaid, you want to add? Stuff coming up, what we need to know about?
I'll lead off just by reminding everybody that the Homicide Institute is this week coming up. If you haven't registered, please go on to the Zaid has posted it on the Facebook page. A lot of information. Zaid, passing the torch to you. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
I was muted. I'm sorry. I said this is from the 16th to the 20th. Yesterday was actually the deadline, but still try and get it in. This teachers and parents especially. right? Because there's some powerful presentations that take place. I think Noelle's doing a presentation for the Summer Institute as well. We didn't get a chance to uplift that. So that is important. This is Black August, right? The 21st, 50th anniversary of George Jackson's assassination, the 190th anniversary of the Nat Turner uprising, right? So we want to uplift that. The 17th, Marcus Garvey's son, Dr. Julius Garvey, is presenting a bust of his father by the great Jamaican sculptor Nigel Benz to the headquarters of the African Union. Talking about back to Africa, we still trying to figure that out right, but with a Pan-African lens. So there's a whole lot going on that we need to get down with. You're muted, John. You're muted, Jonathan. You're still muted.
John, you're still muted.
All right, now I'm good. Now I'm good. All right. So, yeah, we've reached another end to another week of All Politics So Local. Next week is going to be the Mayor's Forum. We're also going to have Superintendent of Newark Public Schools, Roger Leon, on for next week's show. So this should be a very good hour, especially dealing with, the coming of the school year and all the questions and things that people have in relation to COVID. Right?
It's almost time to go back to school.
It's time to go back to school, right? So for many administrators are already back. People are already prepping and planning to get started again. So thank you for another week. Thank our guests, Marcia Brown, Raquel Lumumba, Reverend Conrad Tillard, and of course Noelle, Lorraine Williams for our guests for this week. We will talk to you next week. Everyone be safe, be careful, be productive, and we'll see you next week.
And you don't stop.